Well, hello there, my dear children of the apocalypse. How are we doing today? Welcome to Doom Time. This is probably going to be episode 5, following Spitfly's episode. And joining us today is Mr. Napalmratte, one of my all-time favourite people, one of the few that I've actually gotten to meet in real life. Was it August 2019, I believe, in Vienna?
Yes, it was when you went to a Rammstein concert, and I went to the Rammstein concert the day after, and which we both agree on is spectacular to watch
Absolutely.
Rammstein.
It really is. I visited, not this year, but last year I was there, and this year I'm going again to Munich this time with Remy, who's another person I'm going to have on this podcast at some point. We met in, was it Schönbrunn?
Next to the what's it castle? What do you call it?
Yeah, isn't it Schönbrunn? It's a, well,
Yeah, I
it's not,
don't remember the name, but
yeah,
yeah, it's
it's,
basically where Sissy and Franz had a residence.
yes, it's a huge residency, very known.
Yeah,
Lots of tourists there, and,
yeah.
well,
It
not,
it
not a
was
bad place.
basically yeah, it was basically going up a hill from the castle itself, and you had a wonderful look around on Vienna, and it was really good looking there.
Hmm.
And this is the place where we basically met IRL.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I have really fond memories of Vienna because there's just two things I profoundly like. Number one is that the traffic lights would blink when going from green to red, so that as you're driving, you can anticipate when the light's going to close. In our country, it just goes
Yes.
to red. So like you're driving at 60 kilometers an hour, and suddenly the red light's on, and you're just fully on the brakes, which I think is quite dangerous. And the
Yeah.
second thing, the parking, as far as I'm aware, is free. At least where I parked with my ex-girlfriend at the time, it was because you're parking next to Schönbrunn. It's one of the biggest, most known sites in Vienna, and the parking was absolutely free. I don't know if that's standard or all over Austria, but it was a nice experience.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we were once in Brussels, like a long time ago when it was like the final voyage of in high school basically. And there's also something interesting about the traffic lights because they have a countdown. They literally have a countdown when it's going to shift from green to red and the other way around. So, turning off your engine, start, stop, whatever. And I think that it's absolutely hilarious that in Germany we don't have such a thing. Like there is no blinking, there is no countdown, and very often it's really unoptimized in terms of having a green wave going through cities. So you always stop, accelerate. It's horrific.
Yeah, but I mean, then again, if you go a little bit further down south into the Balkan region, you'll realise that most places don't even have stoplights. So there's that part.
Yeah, the
Um,
bigger car wins.
yeah, basically.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's the rule of the stronger, the rule of the arrogant. But we could
Yeah.
say the rule of the arrogant kind of stood in War Thunder as well, wasn't it? It was a bit of a gamble of power. The person who had the most, as the Spanish say, cajones, the balls, he would be able to sort of get further ahead in the game.
And then there is the good old flavor of the month premium. Um, remember the IS6? Oh God.
I mean, the IS6 was one I didn't really have a problem. Oh, was I? Well, I might have been the only person who never had a problem with the so-called Russian bias, right? Because I think there was an area of time where flavor of the month was just trying to find the next Russian bias thing. But then again, I never had problems shot trapping stuff, so that could be an argument to be had.
I think yes, of course. It really depends what your experience is, but and you're right that if you're looking for Russian buyers, you're finding Russian buyers. If you're looking for American buyers, you're finding American buyers, and so on. And in the very early days, you had the Target 2, who basically ruled the battlefield, because as an example, you had the Russian equivalent was the IS-2, less gun depression, less penetration, much lower rate of fire, and if you penned the turret front of a Tiger 2, it didn't blow up. It just was reduced to two crew, so you needed a second shot, whereas the Tiger 2 could very reliably one shot the IS-2. But then there were all the funny pixels that you aimed for a clean shot on the flat turret front, and some pixels just simply said no. And this is where the Russian bias came from the Germans. But apparently, on the Russian forums, it was then German bias, and so the grass is always greener on the other side.
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, if I had to choose between a Tiger 2 and an IS-2, I'd always choose a Tiger, because of course, there's a helicopter flying over my house. Just as we start making this conversation, I can't even escape helicopters in real life. But I was going to say the IS-2 for me was an abysmal vehicle to drive, extremely weak from the front, but you probably remember there were a lot of people that would drive it backwards. You would show the rear of the tank, the engine, and just sort of soak up shots. I mean, you couldn't take advantage of any gun depression in that case, but you were a little bit more survivable, I guess.
Yeah. So there is also the introduction of the object 248, which is basically an IS-2 but with a 100mm gun. And I also tried the reverse driving, and to a certain degree, it worked. Not because the engine soaked it all up, but because you didn't have like the slope inwards. That if you angled like the side armor, you then offered a flat plate like you have on the IS-2 and the IS-2 Mod 44s, and only by angling the hull, you basically had like the turret or the armor values of a Panther with the side armor of a Tiger 2, and many people were just confused by that, and especially the confusion was very often enough to make it work.
But I also think in general, Russian tanks, at least from what I remember playing, they were never really made to be angled much. It was German tanks that would excel at this side scraping and trying to get into a position where you could, especially like a Tiger 1, because it's a box, so you have to angle. But with Russian tanks, it sort of, I guess the argument we could make about Russian bias would be more in the sense that German tanks, to be played efficiently, required a certain play style to be adapted, whereas a Russian tank could be played a little bit more, simplified.
Straightforward.
Yeah, it was a little bit more straightforward.
Whereas, and here's the funny thing, just to get into a bit more detail here, because it's really interesting. There was also, if you think about the IS-3, even if you angled it like a Tiger, you unangled the front wedge, which was pre-angled, if you will. But it was still angled enough. If you showed that side flat, it was still angled on a vertical basis enough to bounce even a Jagdtiger's APHE round or APCBC round. And when you try to do the side scraping in something like a Tiger, then two things were still there. There was still this what I consider to be a smoke launcher, or was it an anti-infantry mini mortar that is right at the edge where your gun barrel looks over, and you had no gun depression. And then when you offered the side armor to something like a T3485, and it had the APHE BC round loaded, it did the funny thing with kind of almost ignoring the angling. And so in theory, you could say, yeah, German tanks are better in this. But when I tried this, at reasonable combat distances of, let's say, 400 or 500 meters, I still got my ass handed to me by a T-34-85 that just bounced my shell, even though I was in an ambush position, and, all those things. And when you see something like this, and then you see something like the IS-6 happening, right? Where then you do actually testing like I did, where it was with the... what was the German tank that got with the premium heat FS? The RE-251, right?
Yeah, the small light one.
Yeah. And that was really ridiculous because the Hesh round has 102 millimeters of penetration. The IS-6 has 100 millimeters of armor. And the stat card goes to 60 degrees angles of attack, right? But the IS-6 had, I think, 65 degrees of angling. So it was outside of the realm, even though, Hesh has a particular way of working, and you just couldn't pen it. And the Heat FS round had so little post-penetration damage effect on an IS-6 that it basically had no, if you will, shrapnel effect, or outside of the laser-like heat beam, And even if you directly hit armor, it was the time when the armor just went black and didn't explode. And that was just outright furious when the IS-6 just drove down a line, bounced everything that should pen, taking not enough damage, and then just one-shotting you. And even going through the turret front of a mouse, where it had not enough pen, but because the mouse back in the days had 120 millimeters of steel and it was not rolled homogeneous armor, but cast iron or cast steel, it had the lower modifier. And with 207 millimeters, you could pen 220 millimeters of armor. And so you could deal damage to a mouse, and the mouse had to go for pixel hunting. And we also did the testing on the turret front where, it was various different layers, like it was at least 2 layers, and they had the wrong modifier. So in theory, even a Panther should go through the turret front, but in fact, not even a Leopard 1 with the APDS could go through, right? And except if you hit like the machine gun port, and then you had all those funny scenes where somebody just sniped that right pixel where the machine gun was, and said, "Bro, I have no problem penning it." Or I also tried to make the shot trapping work, which was really unreliable for me, but for you apparently it worked. So you see, in battle, it was really unreliable. And also the cupola, which was there was the funny thing that even a Jagdtiger's 128 millimeter AP-CBC round, which used to be one of the strongest rounds in the game, just was eaten up by the optics. So you basically had to shoot at the angled part of the cupola where there was no optic to pen it. It was just, if you wanted to see Russian bars, you had all the arguments. If you were just a cold-blooded, sweaty gamer type, you had no problem with it, right? It was really one of those very controversial things. And one last thing on that thing is that the T-29 was also introduced, I think, a patch later, and there was a funny thing, because in War Thunder, usually all ammo racks should just explode when they get hit. But it was 2-stage ammunition on the T-29, and it had the propellant part and it had the shell part. And when you just snapped the lower glacis, there was a hidden invisible armor plate internally, just right after the radio operator and the driver. So you could pen there with an APHE round from a long 88 and take out those 2 guys, but the ammunition wouldn't take any damage. And even shooting with an APDS round, the ammunition, the warheads would eat up the ammunition, go black, disappear, but the propellant charges wouldn't blow up. And that was also changed later. Just like with the IS-6, after a couple of weeks, somebody said, whoopsie daisy, we made a mistake after the initial sales. So it's basically not really a case of Russian bias, but money bias or premium bias, because they did it all the same with the Tiger II SLA 16, where the armor tracks on the side of the turret, which were the entire turret was covered, it could absorb a 3-inch gun. The American on the Hellcat, for example, or the Jumbo 76, it could absorb apparently the APHE flat side on, whereas on the normal Tiger II, the same armor didn't absorb it. So there was all sorts of shenanigans. And also the SLA 16's fuel tank would explode when getting hit by a shrapnel, despite it being diesel, after the initial sales. So this is where Gaijin gets this interesting reputation from.
I mean, because... okay, let me stop you there, because, man, you're one of the most analytical people that I know. You could probably ramble on for hours. I think you might just be more educated than the War Thunder's Wikipedia team, but that's
terrible.
Well, that depends on the context. I mean, the thing about shot trapping and what you say is pixel chasing, I guess, or trying to pinpoint the pixel that you have to hit in order to penetrate and do the damage. I come from a bit of an old school gamer, and I don't know how much you recall, but back when I started making content, I was sort of joking around. We used to say, Git Good. Like that was that was the motto that we sort of had. It was, instead of searching for, and I feel bad because I think that mentality wasn't just really good in the game, but I think it's a good mentality to have in life in general. It's sort of like when you find an obstacle, you don't necessarily go looking for that bias or the if or the why, but you just sort of push through it. For me, look, I never noticed, and I have to emphasize, I've never noticed these particular problems that most people were describing, whether it was close air support at the time or, as you mentioned, some of these premiums being a little bit like, yeah, there were tanks that were harder to kill, right? And there were tanks that were annoying to play against. And there were things that I hated playing against myself. You know, maybe when there was a, like, what was that? Russian Shilka, right? The SPA, when that was added to the game, I was like, fuck, this thing is so strong. It made my playstyle harder because of the way that it interacted. But there was always a way you could counter it. Like if you say, okay, so I'm in a team and we're playing against a load of IS-6s, then what I can always do is I can always, you know, rush B, Suka, get into a plane and then do the damage. I don't know how it is now with all the changes they've done to spawn points mechanics and so on, but I think there was always a mechanic which you could use to your advantage to sort of fight against this so-called FOMO, the feature of the month. Because the very first time I heard feature of the month was the CL13. It was, you know, a German Sabre, so it was changing the dynamic, because it used to be MiG-15s on one side of Korea, spawning against Sabres on the other side of Korea, and that was pretty much 9 out of 10 matches. You'd see a couple of F-80C Shooting Stars, a couple of MiG-9s, and then suddenly this Sabre is introduced, and now you've got Sabres on one side, Sabres on the other side, but this Sabre is now a little bit less powerful in its gun department, but it's faster. And so the play style was starting to change, and everybody was waving how this was just the next greatest thing. But if you think about it, in the development of War Thunder, every time they added a new patch, one of those vehicles in that roster would be better. When the MiG-17 was added, that was feature of the month, right? Now you've got, I don't know what it is, probably one of those newest jets, right? I guess MiG-29 or whatever. That's going to be the best thing. And in the next line of planes, there's going to be another one that's going to perform just marginally or slightly better than the rest. And so you can go through and look for these supposed biases, but if we're completely honest, with the amount of vehicles this game has now, and even had back then, to me it seemed pointless to go looking for that supposed bias, as opposed to just learning, adapting, improvising, right? In the words of Bear Grylls, improvise, adapt, overcome. You just sort of try to find a play style that still works for you, isn't going too much out of your way, is still efficient in what you're trying to grind, and you get around the problem. Because, you know, there were people who had issues. I namely recall, I think the first video that put me out there on the map, where I became an ego boy and so on, was a video I made. I think I was playing the Panther 2, which has now been removed, I think, or is in the.
You can't research it anymore, but if you
had it, you
still have it.
Yeah. So I was playing the Panther 2, which I think in my memories will remain as one of those favorite vehicles of all time, because it was just so iconic with that night vision thing that probably still doesn't work.
Style. So much, actually, absolute style.
It really is. A beautiful camouflage as well. And I think the map we were playing on, I forget what it's called. It's, you know, the map where there's balloons, it's on the coast, like Normandy, probably.
Normandy, yeah.
Yeah. And we were playing against a team which had a lot of T-54s. And if I recall correctly, they were from 1947 to 1949. So there was 3 of them. Or was it 47, 49, and
50 something.
54 maybe? You can check, because I know that you're in game right now.
How do you know?
Oh.
There's the 49 is the first one, then the 47, and then the 51 these days.
The 51, yeah. So the 47 was different from the other 2 in that it could be shot trapped. The way that its turret was put together, it allowed for shot trapping. And if you're playing in a Panther 2 against a T-54 1947, the only way to kill it from the front, other than shooting the gun barrel and then going around and flanking him, was to shot trap. And so the truth of the matter is that I could go into that game and say to myself, well, it's Russian bias, I can't fight this, that tank is too strong, and I give up. But with that mentality, you've lost before you've even started. And same goes in life. Same goes with everything you're doing. If you just set off as you're setting off yourself as a failure, right? And so my mentality was just find a way to pull through. If nothing else, think of the satisfaction that there's a person on the other side of the internet who's playing the T-54 1947, and he's in the mental state of, I'm playing the best tank in this match. I've got Russian bias on my side. I'm the greatest player of all time. I'm going to just dominate their team. I'm being down tiered. This is so great. I've got all these bushes on my tank. I've paid for my premium. I've activated all my boosters. And then around the corner comes Orange in his, white Panther 2 camouflage with a night vision thing that doesn't work and just shot traps you and you're dead in one shot. That is the energy that I was sort of feeding from, is knowing that, being the underdog is this really, really fun experience.
Yeah, couple of things. First of all, back in the days, the T-54-47 had a 200 millimeter turret front, according to the stat card, and that has been reduced now to 100 millimeters. So there is that. And
Significantly
now,
weaker now.
yeah, it's still angled, and you have the funny pixel thing. And I also saw a lot of experienced T-54-47 drivers that were just wiggling their turrets. They were just accelerating and braking, so they were horizontally and vertically wiggling around with the weak spots or the area where you can shot trap. And when you then miss your shot, the chance, where they then in the meantime reload, and you miss that one chance, they use your reload against you, and you can't do really the same.
That's
Tiger
true,
2, mouse, whatever.
But you have to keep in mind that War from the Ground Battles was always based around lineups, and I don't recall correctly what exactly that lineup for the Russians would have been, but I think the Panther 2 was 7.0 at the time, and the T-54 1949 or 1947 would have been 7.3. So the argument could be made that the person who was driving that tank, because if you remember, the ZSU 57, which is the SPA of choice, was 7.7. So the person making the lineup has an option, right? He can take this really amazing medium tank and go to a 7.3 battle and have a chance of being slightly down tiered and dominating. But he's going to have an absolute crap SPA to pair with that at 3.7. What is it? Because there used to be a huge gap between them, right? You went from 3.7 to 7.7 in SPA, nothing in between. So you've got no SPA to go with. You're limited with your plane choices because you're going to have to take something like a TU2 or you can't take a MiG at the time, I don't think, because that was already like 7.377. So my point being is that, yes, you could have, like if you, at the time, if you took me and you gave me a lineup with just a T-54 and you did all the turret wiggling and you were down tiered, yeah, it's undefeated. Like, I don't think how anybody could go up against a player of mine or your caliber or a bunch of the other guys that are in like pro teams if they were down tiered using this tank. But you have to understand that the majority of them weren't. That's why the reason why I didn't notice this so much is because it just didn't happen, right? Most T-54s that I encountered in a Panther 2 were people who were stock, were people who had a really crappy lineup. And so it wasn't just that when I shot trapped them, I would, be doing something challenging. But most importantly, that person, if they haven't done any damage yet, they were likely out of the game. Because, again, they had nothing else useful to spawn in. Because T-54 1947 comes after, at the time, I believe it was T-44, maybe T-44 100. So they're not gonna spawn that in. They don't have enough spawn points for like an IS-3. But even if they did, IS-3 is a pretty crap tank compared to the T-54. No SPA, like we mentioned, likely no planes. So that person is out, and you've completely eliminated one player from the game. So the reason why I never noticed it or never really paid much attention, because I think in the grand scheme of the picture of the match, it didn't matter, right? I think it was the guy who was spawning in the milk truck and rushing to capture points and then spawning in a bunch of bombers. That guy would be more dangerous for me than the impending doom of having to do the shot trap.
Yeah, well, one thing that I also have to add here is about the CAS, right? The over the years, you forget about some of the inequalities. But for example, when a plane is destroyed,
Hmm.
the wing is shot off and you get the kill message, it's not necessarily out. You still can course correct a little bit and still can release your bombs, spread the rocket fun around. And when you then get killed by this after you actually killed the player, that is also an inequality between,
Okay, so you mean
you
like
know,
you're in a tank and you're machine gunning a plane, and you
yeah,
you kill them, but they're still alive enough to be able to sort of revenge
yeah,
bomb you, or actually revenge bombing in you, because like you know how it goes. You go into a match,
yeah, the
you
suicide bombing
yeah
basically.
you
And
you
especially one thing is that always was great inequality was the PE8 with the 5-ton bomb, right?
I don't think
Completely.
that is the case. I mean, it was a
It's still the case, but now the Germans also have like a 1.8-ton bomb on various different
yeah,
planes,
but I
and I
mean,
think a
think of the
3-ton bomb.
P8. Think of the P8 in this way. What you get when you spawn the P8 in is an extremely slow, extremely vulnerable plane that pretty much it's gonna be hard not to get a kill, right? But what you're sacrificing is with a P8 is you're sacrificing time you could be doing literally anything else in the game in order to have a small shot at getting a load of kills so you can then ship it off to Thunder Show or whatever and get your 5,000 golden eagles, right? You're doing it for the meme. I don't think any match, well, I shouldn't say any match, maybe there were like, 10, 12 games over the course of all War Thunder games ever that were won just because the P8 managed to take an entire team out, right? But planes don't win matches. This was my number one argument for close air support, was that no match has ever been won because of close air support, because you still have to drive a physical tank or an SPA or whatever into the capture point. Maybe now you can land a helicopter in it, and that's, maybe my argument doesn't stand anymore. But then again, close air support today is nothing like what it used to be.
Yeah, now we have laser guided bombs.
Yeah, but you
You
also
think I'm
have you
you
also have
think you
laser
think I'm
laser
joking?
guided close to, surface to air missiles, right?
Yeah,
So
like obviously it has changed, and there is also one funny thing when we come to the inequality. One story that I really have to tell, and that is of a Russian premium tank. Now we have rank 7, and we are about to get rank 8 probably because we already have rank 8 with planes now. And there is the story of the 2S38, a Russian light tank that apparently barely is service now but is a full battle rating under the highest battle rating that there is with tanks. And it basically has everything. It has APFSDS, it has APHE, it has also proximity fuse HEVT rounds that kill. It has IRST, which is, you could basically say it's a radar lock without the enemy getting a radar lock warning. It is a different system, but in War Thunder it plays like
okay,
this.
so for me as an uneducated swine, because I'm not playing the game for the past 5 years, this is what, like a one of those light tanks with a faster firing gun
Yeah,
ish.
it's 57 like the ZSU 57 too.
Okay,
TLDR.
okay.
And it's just effectively better. It also has a stupid crew placement. There are all three of the guys are very much in the front. The turret's empty, and the ammo rack is surprisingly small for what it is. So you're shooting with your APFSDS basically through nothing. If you're a new player or if you just get the side, and it just turns around and just nails you to death. Just give me a split second. I need 5 seconds to close the door.
Yeah, I have to warn everybody listening to this podcast that Napalm does like to ramble. Here, as well as in YouTube channel, he is a bit of a non-stop talker. He likes going into details. I think this guy really ought to get a job at some sort of. He could probably replace ChatGPT. I was thinking about. Is he
So
back
I'm
yet?
back.
Okay, perfect. So you didn't hear what I just said. Perfect.
Something about job and replacement.
Yeah, you do know ChatGPT.
That is some sort of bot, right? A text creating bot, from
Yes, a
what I've
text
heard.
creating bot. It's extremely useful for certain certain, like, it's a tool, right? It's like if I gave you a hammer, you could go smashing nails, you could smash your finger. Depends on how you use it, but you are like that chatbot, but for War Thunder, because I think if I gave you any question related to the game, you'd be able to answer it in superb detail. And that goes to say that even today, I could probably, create a battle rating list of most of the vehicles and be accurate. But you go deeper than that, like, because you have so much information on penetration values and how different things work. You're more, I hate using the word nerdy, but I also don't quite know the difference between nerd and geek, but I think nerd is the correct word. You're just a little bit more nerdy when it comes to the sort of analytical side of things. I don't mean
knowledge
that
about a specific topic that in real life nobody cares about.
something like that, I guess. Yes.
Yeah, but honestly, to get a bit back on that statement, I'm not really playing that much top tier tanks, and especially I think I haven't touched Jets in a year or so because it's absolutely mad what's going on there.
I mean,
Like,
but also you were never much of a plane player. You like
I used to absolutely love props.
I know, but like
Recently,
if you had to take a look at most of the content creators and you said like, what is the one thing they specialize in? For me, you were always the guy about tanks who also might be one of the only actually you're the only person that I know that actively plays boats, or at least you were interested in boats when they came out. Because
I'm
most
still
of
playing
us,
them, yeah.
yeah, most of us weren't. Like for me, the War Thunder that I would want back, even though I enjoyed tanks up until 1.69. I'm still a plane player, and the only thing I really miss about War Thunder, or War Thunder as its whole, is the dueling and the old jet battles and the sort of excitement. And I also think that was the part of the game that we lost that could have been so very crucial for retaining viewers on streams and so on, because people loved watching that stuff.
Well, there is one very interesting statement that I want to make about planes. If you look now at the tech trees of the various different nations, they are very, very long. We have a lot of battle ratings, a lot of tiers. But the funny thing is that the lower you go, low tier is fun tier, right? Where you just can derp a little bit around without try hard sweating too much. And this is where I think the old flavor of War Thunder is still there, where you just can duel others. And sure, where is the difference between a seal clubber and just somebody enjoying the game? It's
Yeah.
I think a fluent border. But what I tried to say is the one thing: the most awful places in War Thunder are those where Gaijin changes things. Because they're fiddling around, they're screwing up, they're making deliberate, imbalanced things so they can sell stuff more. And so, top tier chats that we currently have now, in a couple of years, will be the good old days. And
I've got a hypothetical question for you, because
yeah,
I used to think a lot like you. I used to think, oh my god, they're just screwing everything over. But if you remember, like when I started playing, this was just after beta sort of closed off. The only jet for Americans was the A5 Sabre, and you had the MiG-15 Bis, and you had the Me-163 and the Kai-200, and I think the British actually had two Meteors, the long wing and the short wing, and maybe even the Mark 8. I'm not entirely sure, but that was it. That was all there was. And all video games that are online, they're all made the same way, and that is that every year they have to come up with something new for top tier players, because in a year's time, if I just play planes, I will have all the jets, I'll have them all spaded, I'll be bored of it. So you have to give these players something new. Obviously, this means opportunity for new premiums. Obviously, this means opportunity for new money. But the reality is that I think it's not that they're forcefully or by they're not doing it deliberately by forgetting the old part of the game. It's just their focus is always going to have to be new. And they're adding it at a rate, and I'm sure that their development team has a calendar, a schedule, where they say, okay, we've added the MiG-29, so they know how many more vehicles they physically can add, because they're running out of headspace, right? Unless they're going to go and develop the game into futurism, they're going to run out of things to add, because you're going to get up to what, an F-22 Raptor, and then that's it. There's no more planes after that because they haven't developed them. Lockheed or whatever companies in America and Russia are developing these top tier, advanced things. They're going to run out of those things. And after that, I mean, so they have to really think about where the game is headed and say, okay, so we can keep adding this content, let's say for the next 5 years. And then when we get to there, we'll, I don't know, we're going to add some new mechanic, or maybe they're going to reset the servers. You never know. I'm still, I still stand in the sense that if Gaijin was prepared to bring back an old version of the game, the way that like RuneScape did, where they just, they took a game from 2007 and just said, okay, we're going to go right back to where this thing started and we're going to develop it from there. It's like going back to War Thunder patch 1.23 in 2013 and saying, okay, we're going to go from here. But we're not going to add helicopters, and we're not going to add ships, and we're not going to add anything like that sort.
But they profited too much from this to not introduce it again.
I understand. Look, I mean, as I'm older now, and I'm no longer an infant child, I start to understand that business, unfortunately, makes sense. You have to make money. And if you have the opportunity to make a lot of money, why wouldn't you? Right? Like,
well, I think there was a really interesting statement when at the Wacken Open Air, I explained what War Thunder is, and he basically said, well, it sounds like the free-to-play games are the most expensive ones, and there is truth to that. But to go to the statement, yes, you're right, there are some limits to what Gaijin can introduce. Currently, we are at the Leopard 2A6, right? And the current version that the Germans have are the most modern is the Leopard 2A7V. So Gaijin can probably add 1 or 2 more versions to the Leopard, maybe 1 new IRST system, I don't know, and then make rank 8 out of that, right? And then that's literally it for tanks. But the problem is that this leads to 2 funny things. First of all, how will Gaijin know if the values they give to the armor, the guns, etc., and the APFSDs are correct? Because that thing is partially or overall classified because it's right now in service, right?
Well, I've heard stories of War Thunder forums being the biggest place for people to reveal secret documents, essentially.
Yeah, unclassified material, and Gaijin is like, guys, don't, because Gaijin can't use it. It's basically, I would exaggerate. I don't know if I'm exaggerating, but it's basically treason if you make the classified documents available. First of all, Gaijin can't use it. Second of all, you don't gain anything from this. And third of all, I think that the War Thunder forums might be a real great meeting point for certain state agencies trying to figure out what the enemy actually has now in active service. And if you think that I'm making fun of this, well, I'm much closer to reality than otherwise. So that's one thing. And I think that this is, in a way, a very interesting development that I was not prepared to see like this, right? And it's also interesting how far behind planes are. And to go back to the ship part, sorry to annoy you with this quickly here, but one thing that always annoyed me about Gaijin was the inequality. Sure, there always had to be a new top dog, right? And let's say back in the days it was the 3 big main nations, the Americans, the Germans, and the Soviets. And then you ran into the problem, what do you give the Germans once, after the Me-262, right? Because then this is where the development stopped for a while. And then it took a while before the Germans got US jets for the West Germans and Soviet jets for the East Germans. And, you have also a little bit of interruptions. But the way that Gaijin is addressing this, particular in the battleship faction, because it's patrol boats parallel to destroyers and cruisers, which is an awful design. And then it goes from destroyers and cruisers to battleships. And then you look at the Italians, which now just recently got their 2nd battleship, which still has 12-inch guns, whereas they're fighting the Soviet Super Fantasy 12-inch guns, which have like so much more explosive, rate of fire, performance, whatever. And they have like three battleships and one super battle cruiser. You go to the British, which have already multiple battle cruisers and battleships, and the Germans, which have a plethora of battleships and battle
Oh,
cruisers.
okay. Look,
And
you're
and
going really, really into details in the ships, but I
no,
think
no. The thing is, why should you grind Italy? You know, why should you grind Italy at all? And the reason why
let's be honest. I think ships for the game they bring in less than 5% of their income, right?
I wouldn't say this because there is one thing that you don't know. And I think a lot of people are also not quite aware of what's going on. So just let me tell the story. It hopefully takes less than 3 minutes, and
Hopefully.
you'll be amazed about Gaijin. So to end here, the thing with the battleships, you basically have a battleship with okayish 12-inch guns fighting battleships, multiple battleships with 15-inch guns, better armor, speed, AA. And the reason for Gaijin was that they didn't find all the documents for the introduction of the Italian battleships, right? So basically, Italy had one battleship versus multiple battleships in other nations. But Gaijin should have pre-planned for that, you know? And so you have, despite having this huge variety of vehicles, there is no there is no reason for players to go down that one particular nation. So you only see a fraction of what's going on. And now down to why Gaijin is still profiting massively from naval. First of all, whenever there is a new ship, you see tons and tons of people exclusively playing premium ships, like nothing else. And some of the most
But
profitable
okay, isn't
ones
isn't that
are
everywhere in the game? Isn't like every time a new patch comes out, or every time
not
there's a
like
new
that.
premium, everybody's in the premium?
Not like this. Not to that scale. Like
I mean,
it's
but there's,
ridiculous.
correct me if I'm wrong, there's also significantly less ships, or should I say boats, in the game than there are tanks to choose from or planes to choose from, right?
That is partially
But also, I
correct.
have no idea how naval works. The only time I've ever played naval battles, ironically, was the YouTuber Cup, the finals, where I played with Slickby and Kath, and I think it was it wasn't Scottish Koala. It was help me out. Oh, I've forgotten all the names of all the guys who were making content with, but the oddballs, right? So it was the
Yeah.
four of us, and we were playing against I don't know if it was Mike Goes Boom's team or but anyways, it was, we sort of memed around and we said jokingly, let's make the finals a naval battle. And Sean, at the time, the commentator for Gaijin, whom I think he disappeared, he's no longer working for them. That guy was. I'll never forget his reaction on stream, because as we were streaming, I was also watching the stream, and he was just going crazy that we actually were crazy enough to choose ships. But you see, the problem I've got with boats, and the reason why I'm going to always call them boats, is because for a little unknown time, I actually played that game called World of Warships. Because World of Warplanes was shit. World of Tanks is probably a good game, but I don't like the way it plays. But World of Warships was genuinely really fun, because you had destroyers, which were fast. You had the battleships, which were slow but packed a punch. And then you had the carriers, which combined my love for aviation, but in a tactical way. It was almost like playing chess on this big map where you sort of had to align where the torpedoes were going to come in. And maybe foolishly, but considering that I spent a lot of time in the early days of War Thunder, we had a lot of maps that were naval. There were a tremendous amount of Japanese versus American, back then it was still all historical battles, where you would take off from
Yeah.
carriers. And
Yeah.
to me, that's, there was a bomber. The Japanese bombers were renowned. There was one particular patch I'll never forget, which was, it was known because if you had a full squadron of those bombers, they could take out the enemy. I don't know if it was carriers or the airfield, but it was a really, really fun and stressful way to play against. But back then, nobody called it Japanese bias. Where there was the meme, all year base belonged to us, where people would just spawn in year 2 bombers, full bomb load, and just take out the enemy airfield, and the game was over.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I made my initial fortune of Simulines.
But you see, maybe I'm wrong, but these types of moments, they no longer exist, and they haven't existed for years. The moments where, because this was the type, maybe I'm one of the few players, but I would be willing to say that the majority of us, if you were in that match, and you were on any team, and you weren't playing that year 2, you were still having fun. Because you were like, wow, what the hell just happened? I want to try that. Right, and then for the next couple of matches, you would, maybe you'd call up your friends and you'd all go into one massive squadron. And that was back when it was sort of, gaming for me was communal. It was this idea, let me go up on Skype, let me get my friends, let me hang out. And then that just stopped with all the grinding and all the I don't know, the fun was taken away somewhere. We used to always play squadrons. We used to always find ways to do these fun tournaments and find funny ways to play, and I met a lot of really interesting individuals through this. Like, you'd go into a match, and you would... Wasn't there this thing where you could talk to somebody in private during a match? Wasn't there some sort of way to filter?
There was a feature, yeah.
Right?
But
you know what I mean?
You could write to a specific person
exactly.
in chat, I know that. Yeah.
So, like, you could reply, like, somebody on the enemy team would be like, hey, Orange, like, we've, I don't know, spam of B-29s from this squadron, and you were playing on a certain map and you knew exactly where they're going to go, and the point was that this other person, he wasn't doing it so that his team would lose. It wasn't like it was, oh, it's Orange, let me give him some tips so that I can get into a video, right? The idea was that he genuinely knew that those bombers would be annoying because, let's say, the squadron was renowned for climbing into space. So by me being made aware of those people, I could then go and take them out. And if I was in the right plane, like if you're playing, what was that, 262 with the Narwhal, right, the 50mm gun, perfect. So if I know there's a bunch of bombers, I'll just go farming. And I miss those days, because I think there was a moment where just chat became dead. And the only people who typed in chat were, people who would rage, people who do some kind of advertising. And I don't recall when it was exactly, but there was a moment where I actually turned off my in-game chat completely. I went from playing this game the way a normal player would to the level where my sounds were turned off, my chat was turned off, my DMs were turned off. I just isolated myself. And partially, yes, because I was a content creator, because I didn't want, people spamming me swear words in the middle of a stream. But I also feel like some of that spirit of the game's innocence was lost, that it just wasn't quite as fun. Because, like, if I ask you right now, what's your favorite, most memorable moment of War Thunder, what would you say? What game?
Ooh, that's a good one.
What game mode? What vehicle? What's that one thing? Because I still recall matches I played, 9,000 hours ago. I recall them it was yesterday.
The most memorable win that I had that was totally unexpected was in the Kika, actually. And I think it goes back to RRB when I switched basically from Air Arcade to RRB, right? And I had the Kika. It was fully stock. And we were on this huge map where the Japanese had the carriers and the US had to start from the airfield on land. And it was shortly after the introduction of the B-29, lots of turrets, huge bomb load, and they could actually win by bombing the carriers.
And it was spammed out massively, right?
Exactly. And I was there, and it was, I had the 130mm, which was inaccurate. And it was the patch where the 30mm barely did any damage. I had stock belt, with practice rounds and all the fun. And I think you had only, 50 rounds in that one. And I survived the match.
I think it might be, it's either 60 or 120. Like, from my head, it's not too bad, but it's not... I think it's 60 rounds on the Yak 15P. This is me going from top of my head. I know you're in game, you can check, but I think the Yak 15P had like 50 or 100 or 50 or 60 rounds. Yeah. The Kika would have 120.
No, the Kika has for a single gun 50 rounds, but you can equip a second gun which you could research.
Really?
Uh,
Only 50?
yes, only
Oh my
50.
God.
Yeah, it was terrible. And so I survived the match, and then we actually it was also the patch where I think the Bearcat was extremely powerful, and the Kika, especially stock, it just couldn't get up to speed. It has
Yeah.
no acceleration,
Yeah.
no energy retention, no performance at all at altitude, like a really bad jet, really bad. And it also couldn't turn at all, bad wing surface area, etc. Now, what I'm trying to say is that I actually survived the match to this point, and it was amazing because there was a B-29 back at our carriers, and we actually defeated the Bearcats, the P-47s, whatever, right? And suddenly we noticed, oh shit, half of our carriers were gone. If I'm not mistaken, there were 4 carriers, and it was also the patch where the BTD-1 destroyer, which had 2 torpedoes, could one-shot a carrier with 1 torpedo, and so 2 BTDs going around the side could end the match.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the BTD, I think it was this B-29, which perfectly dropped the bombs and took out already the first 2 carriers. And I was like, holy shit, I barely had any fuel left. I had only like 10, 15 rounds of ammunition left, and it was stock, not upgraded gun,
Mm-hmm.
and barely any fuel, no speed. I was heading back. I was hammering in chat. We need to get this B-29, and I was halfway there, and it bombed the third carrier, and it bombed it like the length of the ship, to make sure every bomb hit because it needed multiple ones. So
Yeah.
it had to turn around for the fourth carrier, and he came towards me, and he was aware that I was coming for him, and I was like, basically for the emperor, fully going in, and I threw all my shells in the basket, and he dropped the bombs, bombed the carrier. The carrier was dead, and I was like, Allahu Akbar, and was just going for that wing. And by miracle, multiple shells hit, registered, and saw off his wing. And because when you kill the enemy players, the tickets drop faster, we actually managed to win despite our base being destroyed and also ticking down by I think 50 points.
Yeah.
That was the most memorable win. And after this, you're just in front of the PC, you're shaking, you're in disbelief what just happened. And it was just like years after this, I still remember it that clearly. And I also remember a battle on Mostock in arcade where I was playing the Tiger 2105, and I had a sniping duel at distance. And I got 15-0 in arcade, despite the planes, because my team had enough AA and enough planes in the air to shoot down the enemy cast. And I was just on the flank sniping. And I was hull down. I could cover my turret behind the building. And I was just sniping and sniping and sniping. And I was reducing the enemy team that hard that we actually managed to win. And 15-0 in arcade with a single tank is still the best result to this day. So that was amazing. Give me another 5 seconds. I have to close the door again because my nephews are little monsters.
Yeah, man, that really brings back memories, though. The old historical battles. That was a time. Quite a few good matches I can recall from that era. 100%. Or even back in the old days of arcade, where it was grinding for, I think it was like 1,200 kills, something similar like that. With the very first, it's called Indian Summer back then. It's the first.
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah, I was just mentioning the Indian Summer event, which is the first grinding event, because that brings back memories. I had the 2 Aero Cobras and the F6F Hellcat arcade battles and just grinding. But when you were talking about your story about the Kiko, there was one major change that they've done. It was one of those changes that I don't think got enough feedback, or like not enough people spoke of it. But there was a cheeky change. I don't know where it happened. You no longer see what the enemy's playing. But in the very early days, when you spawned into a game, you wouldn't just see who you were playing up against. You wouldn't just see, oh, okay, there's Orange, there's Napalm. You would know exactly what vehicle they were in. And this is me saying it as a content creator. And actually, ironically, both of us here are, as far as I'm aware, we're in the, maybe there's like 12 of us that spaded everything. Right? I don't know. Do you know anybody else who at some point spaded all the vehicles in the game? Did you meet anyone, or?
I never spaded everything, but I always came very close.
Oh, you've never actually done it?
No.
Well, could it be then? Could it be that Orange is still the grand winner?
Well, there were multiple patches in a row where I had everything that you could buy in as tech tree vehicles go.
Yeah.
And the problem for me was that very often Gaijin went into this cycle of adding things. For the British, it was new 20 millimeters, or where they took away the engine, the supercharger, and re-added them, but you still had to replay them, regrind them. And the same goes for multiple tanks that got then smoke launchers.
Yeah.
And the latest addition was drones to a lot of the light tanks.
I think
So
you
you
were a little bit too late to it. Like when I started spading, like seriously, it was around about the same time that the grind for me to get God of War started, and that was before 1.69. And yeah, then it became I think if I didn't leave War Thunder for the reasons that I left, I would have become mostly frustrated by the fact that even as a content creator who's getting gold per month, who's getting gold from affiliate links, who's, I wouldn't be able to do it. And what I wanted to say before was that, if I wanted to grind and spade some shitty bomber, and I was going into a match, in the old days, everybody would see what you were playing. They wouldn't just go, oh, there's Orange, let me go stream snipe him, but they would be like, oh, there's Orange playing a shitty bomber. Hell yeah!
No. It was not showing what the enemy was playing, but it was the little icon. It was the little icon of the plane.
I think first you could see what they were playing, and then they took that away, and it was just the icon. And the icon, in a way, was enough. But the reason why it was good is, as you mentioned before, there was the BTD destroyer, which had the torpedoes, and so it posed a dangerous threat. Now, if you don't know this threat exists, if you don't have that guy on the enemy team who goes into private chat and tells you, hey, there's two guys flanking the map on the left-hand side. If you don't go after them, you're going to lose the match immediately, and we're all going to have a bad time. So, knowing what the enemy was playing, it allowed for you to sort of adjust your playstyle. If there were a lot of bombers, because back then, you didn't have the 4-bomber limit. Everybody could be in bombers, theoretically. And I think it helped form also a mindset of thinking. No one match was the same. Whereas when they removed that, suddenly you always played more or less the same. You would site climb in the same general area, and I think some of that preparation was taken away, where you could spawn in and say, okay, so I'm in this plane, there's 4 bombers in enemy team, all right, let me adapt for that. And also, the bombing targets, I think, ruined it. I remember, I think it was Berlin. This is the very, very old version of Berlin map that no longer exists for years now. But the way it was built is that it had an assortment of pillboxes that were in this curved area. And I remember playing the Lancaster, which is a dreadful bomber, but the way you would play it is that you would sort of line yourself up with those pillboxes, and then you just fly over them, and you just spacebar, and spacebar, and spacebar, and it was fun, because it wasn't just, let me fly in a straight line and be AFK for a bit, and then get to a target point and just spam all the bombs in, or even better now, I think you have the automatic thing, right, where you can just like press one button and all the bombs will drop, and then back to base and rinse and repeat. Back then, the incentive was go low with the bomber, dive down, use that reticle bombing thing to be accurately dropping bombs on all these pillboxes whilst you defend against a couple of enemy players, not the whole team that they all dive on you. And maybe you shoot one of them down, maybe you don't, you get shot down, and you rinse and repeat. That was bombers. And
Yeah, well, not quite.
yeah, I mean, in most cases it was dive, bomb, die. That's it. And that was the bomber's life. It wasn't very exhilarating, but
it very often depended on the map as well. Like there are RRB maps where you would spawn at such an altitude with your bomber, especially heavy or strategic bombers, that if you just dive just a little bit, just a few degrees, you would pick up so much speed that you would actually go over the enemy fighters without them being properly able to pitch up. And you would be able to drop your bombs, and after this, with the altitude advantage, you just could climb indefinitely and just could hide in space. This was a problem with the B-29 and the TU-4. And after this, by the especially when you say the thing about the reticle, the holographic reticle, they removed it as a punishment for the TU-4, which got
you mean
spammed
the
out.
one that's visible in third person?
Yeah.
I completely forgot that actually used to exist.
Yes,
Exactly, that's the way we used to bomb. I apologise. I used to think we had to go into that view which had like the zoom. No, you were flying in third person, looking at the whole play, and there was a tiny little circle, and that was enough. And it would actually turn. It was yellow, and it would turn red when you were on target. Correct.
Something like this, yeah. But when it actually changed color and you would then drop the
It's too
space
late,
bar,
yeah.
it's too late.
Yeah.
So you actually have to, because of also the split-second delay, you'd had to press just before the actual cross would go over
but
the
once
thing.
you learn that rhythm, you could
Yeah.
it would take you maybe 5 matches to get used to it, and then that was the grind.
Yes.
And it was efficient.
Yeah, and
But I also think it was a
I
non-destructive.
remember also one thing, just to interrupt you. I was at one point in arcades so stupidly good with it. You remember on African Canyon where there were the pillboxes and the medium tanks, and the medium tanks would slowly drive towards you.
Yes.
I was so good in my B-17, and I shit you not, that from the 8 1,000-pound bombs that I had with me, I actually managed to connect 7 to them from 5 kilometers altitude on the tanks. I kid you not. I was that good. On the driving targets from 5 kilometers upwards.
Man, you've now reminded me of the days where I could shoot all the 8 rockets on the Sabre and hit all of them and get 8 kills reliably from any distance.
You get really back in the good old days when I used to have this skill, right? And
I mean, no, it's not that I used to have the skill.
Years later, you look back,
but the
and,
thing is,
I
still have that skill. I'm convinced right now, if I could boot up the game and it was patch 1.69 and everything was the way it was, I would immediately be still able to do it. I'm convinced of it. I think it's like riding a bike. Once you get the feeling of the mouse, because I know right now I haven't played War Thunder in months, and even when I did, like I would log in just for a game and be like, oh yeah, this is boring. I could still duel people and dominate them. Like, these are things that because it is 10,000 hours after all. If you were, I don't know, sewing shirts for 10,000 hours, you'd be able to do it whenever. I don't think it's something you lose. Once you put so much effort into something, it stays. The one thing I'm happy about War Thunder, and one of the reasons, besides the fact that the 10,000 hours that I invested in this miserable game gave me this amazing English, which I will now use to try to develop a business and so on and so forth, but the real reason why I'm happy is that I could have spent these 10,000 hours playing some fantasy game like League of Legends, or even RuneScape. I love RuneScape, but 10,000 hours in RuneScape gives you no applicable information outside of maybe the words that I used in there. But War Thunder is based on real life, right? So I will go to my grave knowing so much more about World War II history than I would normally if I hadn't played this game.
Yeah, because it gets you started, and you then let's say as a normal person,
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely agree on this statement, and I would actually tune it up to 11 because first of all, also in the game, you make connections that you otherwise would have never made.
Yes.
And when we met together with Mike and Max and all the other guys back on the Gentleman Hangar, in TeamSpeak, you know, um, you make so many connections, and then you see the people going on the internet and going at different paths, and then you realize with a lot of the people that you meet there that they are becoming professional historians and so forth. And then you look at your path, and you also kind of moved on from where you basically started. And the same goes for the vehicles. Like when you're just sitting in front of the PC and just absorbing the documentaries, you would never know that the Germans had a concept tank or a prototype tank like the RE-251 that never made it into production, or that there are some various different variants of the Panzer IV which have fundamentally different capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for the AA and how that actually meets when you realize when somebody says, well, this tank had a disadvantage here but had an advantage there, what it actually could mean in battle. And obviously, you then have to still think a bit further for yourself, realizing that you are not there in a real life scenario with infantry, with where you are bound into a command structure, that you're part of a tank spearhead, and that your flanks are secured
Mm-hmm.
by another part of the overall command, etc. And that you have a actual specific target of, for example, clearing
Well,
a
mainly
village.
that you don't have the risk of dying, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is like when we then look at real life events, they are still fundamentally different, but in a certain aspect, you know that issues could be there that somebody else who doesn't play a game that
Mm-hmm.
tries to replicate certain aspects more or less down to historical or down to the document level, right?
Yeah.
Where what that means.
I mean, for me, it's really great. I was driving a lot to this Croatian town where one of the girls I was dating was living, and on the way there, I would drive past probably the biggest war museum in our country, and what they have is they have a ZSU-57 parked outside. They have a T-34, no, sorry, T-54 actually. That's like halfway through a billboard, like as if it's driving through it. And there's also a Sherman parked there. And, you know, if I was just any other regular person, I would drive past these amazing vehicles and just think, oh, tank, right? But it's not. It's to me, it now means so much more. And whereas obviously I don't feel that hard for tanks or that strong for these planes. Are still like, for me, I want to see a Messerschmitt in real life. It's just my favorite plane of all time. It was the first, those plastic model planes you can put together, right? The
Yeah.
first one I had was a Messerschmitt, and then ironically the plane that started the name of the OrangeDoom was the BF-19 G10, because I was putting on the decals. And I thought, oh well, this would be a great name. So ironically, life sort of gives you these things, and what I realized was also that the depth. When I started cycling, because you mentioned before how a lot of us have changed and we've taken up different paths. For me, what I loved about cycling was that I started to discover the world that was right around me. I
Yeah.
realized there were these hills and roads and sites that I didn't know existed. And they were like, 5 minutes away from me. They're in my backyard. If you drew a radius of how far you can walk, most people have that radius. If you go on Google and you type in radius on a map, right? it'll give you a little tool, and you can put a location where you live, and you make the radius happen. For most people, that radius of whether it's 5, 10, 15, 50 kilometers would be entirely painted in red in areas they have not yet researched. Most people don't know where north, east, south, and west are. They don't know what's right around the corner. And I found that out in a really weird way, because as I was starting to explore the world and cycling, and I was talking to other friends, and they were like, oh, where were you? And I would tell them a location, like a nearby hill that I thought everybody knew. They're like, oh, where's that? And then I started to realize just how...
It's crazy.
It's crazy how, there was a really good quote from, actually, I think it was Joe Rogan on one of his stand-ups. He said, I know I'm stupid, and yet I'm still somehow smarter than most of the people I meet. And I started thinking about it. I was like, wait a minute. For most things, that's how I feel all the time. It's like, it became almost every day, like rudimentary, these things. And then I would talk to somebody, and they wouldn't know what I'm talking about. I'm like, so it's like as if, imagine if you're talking to somebody and they don't know who Queen is, the band. Like,
yeah.
Have you heard the Bohemian Rhapsody? And they're like, what was that? Like, if that was a response from somebody, I would literally think less of them, whether they like it or not, whether it's a nice thing or not. Like, I forget what the word is in English. It's sort of like general, or I'm sure German has a wonderful word for that, but it's like general knowledge. It's stuff that every person ought to know. And as you grow up, I think you start expanding it. And so you and me were a little bit more nerdy. We're into planes and tanks. Okay, so that circle that's your general knowledge gets sort of, gets squeezed on one end, and maybe okay, so like personally, I don't give a shit about math. So okay, math goes away. Some general knowledge of mathematics, biology. I didn't mention, but you're a chemistry major. You know way more about chemistry than I'll ever do. I was never good at chemistry or interested in it. So for me, I will have squeezed that part, and it becomes smaller, and I wouldn't be able to give you any chemical, molecular. They're not equations, but nomenclatures or whatever they're called, right? But what I've done is I've enabled myself to have another part of that circle sort of bubbled, and that's like, let's say, my knowledge of English or pronunciation, or maybe it's the knowledge on bikes or some other category that you're strong in. And I feel that once you start crafting this circle of your general knowledge in all the things that you find really important, your favorite music and your art and your movies, you find that stride sort of works. And it's like a play style, wouldn't you say? Like the way in Wolfenstein you have found your play style, and I, back when I still played, had my own play style. It was, whether it was spamming out close air support or doing some reverse boom and zooming, but you find that thing that works for you and you apply it now to real life. For me, that's what I learned from Wolfenstein the most, is that, and that's why I also there was a video I made last year, I think it was called "The Gamer is Dead, Long Live the Gamer," with the idea being that I think games are bad. For most people, they're not giving them anything, they're just soaking up their time, and these people are stagnating, right? They're not moving forwards in life, they're not learning or educating or earning money or getting better with women or whatever. But
yeah. I see where you're going.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that the gamer does possess a certain skill set. It's just you have to learn how to apply it. Because unfortunately, if you're a mathematician, then you're very good at solving complex equations, then it's very simple to see where that person could strive. If you're good at programming, it makes sense. You're going to go and get yourself a job in programming. But a gamer, there's this dream, like, I too wanted to be a content creator. Oh, I'll just play video games for a living, and I'll just make videos, and I'll just be rich. Like, doesn't work, Sonny. I mean, it could work, and I'm glad I gave it a try, but.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much competition from people that just have naturally a better skill at editing, getting footage, and bringing over the message, which is something that when I watched my very early videos, which is always like full cringe mode. Like when you're as a content creator watching your early creations, you're like, damn, son.
But I'm the contra. I was just talking, because I was talking to Spit about this. the first video I ever uploaded, I still left it on there, the A26C Invader. I don't cringe. I look at it and I think to myself, that kid spoke horribly. And now
It's a
look where he is.
testimony to how much you have evolved,
No, but
how much
also
you
like
have
how determined I
improved.
was to make it work. Like for me, that's you know, I've done it once. I've built a channel with 50,000 subs. I built a Twitch community with 25,000 people. These are things that I've done. If I was able to spade all planes and tanks and this shit in Wartham, then what's to say I can't, do the equivalent of some part of life?
Yeah.
There's a thing that sort of pushes me forward now, where it's not, I don't want to look for excuses no more, because I feel like, and don't take this the wrong way, but because we all do this. I still do it. I try not to do it. Most people do it every single day for everything. You present them with a business idea and they go, yeah, but it won't work because of whatever reason, right? Most people will stop at the first obstacle. It's like, they're playing War Thunder and they've just bought their first tank and there's their 15th match in the game and they get killed by Orange in his saber, right? They've bought their premium, they get shit rocketed from 5 kilometers away by 1.69 OrangeDoom, and they're just like, screw this. They're not ready to go through the learning curve of, okay, let me get the SPA, let me learn how to play the SPA, let me learn how to combat this person in the plane. Okay, I'm getting good at it. Now I know how to fight against it. Now I'm going to look for some alternative ways, right? They're not adapting their playstyle. They're trying to get the world to fit in line with their vision. And I don't know if that's... I used to be quite strict against Americans. I used to say that's an American way of thinking. I think it's just a credit card way of thinking. It's this, can we pay our way out of it? Can we just... Because I know you mentioned editing, right? But what's preventing you from outsourcing it, right? Because I also hate editing. And people don't realize that we have to make our own thumbnails and we have to edit our own content and we have to do the commentary, we have to buy all this equipment, we have to learn how to use the equipment. And, if you have a team behind, like, people, I would love, if you asked me about 6 months ago I was still working in the kitchen, I was still in love with food, but I guess what I would have wanted to do would be like Gordon Ramsay. I'd love to travel around the world, cook for people, don't have to worry about cleaning anything. They do all the footage, they do all the recording. Right, that's the dream life.
Yeah.
And you look at that and you think, but it's not doable. Yes, because you don't have a team.
Yeah.
But
well, I have a similar experience, but from a different point of view, right? So I was doing like 2 years ago my master thesis, and I had to go to East Germany to do it. Like it was shortly after the first Corona lockdown. We still had like you had to wear a mask and everything, and we didn't know where things are going. And I still had a connection. Like it was the last straw for asking. And I knew a guy, but it was like 500 kilometers away from where I was living. And I just asked, like, hey, do you know anybody who can offer me a master thesis place? And he was like, well, I can offer you actually one. And I was really skeptical. So to give you a very long story in just a couple of sentences, he had a problem, like a business problem. He needed a certain product purified, and they ran into problems. And they didn't know how to solve the problems with the purification, without creating other problems. And he said, okay, there is an empty room. This is your chance. Go for it. The amount of money you can spend is basically zero. You have to ask me for everything, and you have to give me arguments why you need the expenditure. And I was like, okay, that's my last shot. And then you go through this phase where you have a little bit of an idea. You think, yeah, this can be done. And then you read more into the literature. You get into more stuff. And then with your previous knowledge, you suddenly realize there are some fundamental problems that I have not really a good idea how to solve it quickly, cheaply, or easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, in principle, easy task becomes very, very complicated. And then you are kind of in the situation where you need to come up with ideas, where you need to apply all your knowledge and skill. And at the end of the day, I built from scratch, starting with the tables and chairs and all the equipment and all the people in that area that I did not know, right? I basically built my own laboratory where I was able to purify a waste product to what's it called? To a very high grade.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you could put it into food. And I did it from start to finish. I got um, a very good grade on my master thesis, and I'm endlessly proud of it. The fun thing is that afterwards, I continued to work in that company with my own laboratory and all the stuff that I built. And then I got the task of educating a guy that still was doing something else. Like I got my master of science
Mm-hmm.
degree, and I'm a chemical engineer. Basically, that's the specific title, and I was tasked with educating this guy because in the company there was no other way to teach him the various different points he had to learn, like on the learning table, on basically with the check marks. And it just so happened that the remaining tasks were fulfillable with basically my laboratory or within my laboratory. And the boss that then later got really impressed by how much work I put into this and that I actually got done. For me, it was a matter of um, eat or die, right? Do it or die trying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he was impressed by how much work I put into it, how consistent my results were. Where I was a bit lucky, but I also kind of hoped that I know what I'm doing, and I was really happy when it then actually worked. And I was then tasked to teach this guy who showed no initiative, who was really inconsistent with his grades. And then I realized something. Like when I was a little child and I was going with my grandpa, distributing beer and water and lemonade. That's basically our family business. I was always looking into the bureaus of the various different companies that we were delivering to, and there were people in front of the PC staring at the PC and just hammering in numbers and working. And I always thought, I'm never able to achieve this kind of knowledge. I have no idea what they're doing. And all of a sudden, just a couple decades later, I'm the one teaching somebody that has no idea about this stuff and actually being successful in educating them. And that gave me an immense amount of feeling of accomplishment, of, I would say, pride, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at this stage right now where I look back and I look at this very long list of achievements. And whenever I am currently where I'm working at right now, and I'm confronted with a problem where I have no real initial idea how to solve it, I'm always looking back and think to myself, I have overcome worse than this, right? And I just kind of calm down, get to the task, and somehow get it done, right? In a good way where the company actually can use the results. And I think I recently was out there with a friend of mine where we have met for the first time in years, right? And she was asking me, "Hey, what what would you make differently if you could live your life again?" And I was saying, you know what? I would still feel the same about that I have in general missed chances, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I could have also done this and that. yeah, there are mistakes that I would not try to repeat, like, for example, downloading War Thunder for the first time. But other than this, I think that the way that you live and the experiences that you made in life, they're actually what shaped you to the person that you are. And in hindsight, you could just select the various different opportunities that brought you a step forward and would try to avoid the scenarios where you failed, where you just simply didn't succeed, or where at the end of the day it turned out that you're a massive douchebag. But at the end of the day, also making those experiences is very important because they are also part of the overall success story. And never think that you actually could end up as a Mary Sue, a person that is beloved by everybody,
Yeah.
that can do everything from the very start. No, it's it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. And when you have achieved this, and people know the way that you've walked, then, only then, you have respect. And not just because you have a big fucking gun in your hand, right? That is true respect, and the effort that you put into, let's say, a master thesis, that is a different kind of work than being there sorting out empty bottles, which I've done for a very long time. You know, it's this academic thing that very often gets talked apart, but it's also a different work that is hard when you actually do it. It sounds easy, just research something, just write stuff together. It sounds so easy. Purify this salt from this and this
Yeah. Yeah.
impurity. It sounds so easy, but then actually doing it.
That's
And
this is what we're talking about is exactly what I've noticed is happening with the world, and I've begun doing something which is very drastic, but I've started isolating myself from certain factors, including maybe certain friends, certain groups of people, because what you speak about, is you accomplish something, and sometimes you might feel like you don't get the credit for it. Like I know what I've done in War Thunder. What I missed, what I lacked, was perhaps a certain amount of gratitude from certain people that were able to say, "Oh my God, you're this really great player." And I say this not because it would have hurt my ego, but because I saw that there were so many other players like myself that were the best duelists, the best players, really efficient players. All these guys that were consistently getting top in matches, and they were unable to really showcase their skill and get something for it because there was no esports system in place, because there was no tournament system in place, because we had no ranking system, right? It felt like, imagine if, maybe thesis is a bad example, because even a master's thesis, realistically speaking, nobody is going to now go to your university and pick up your thesis in the library and start reading it, right? Because there's thousands upon thousands of others. But there are these projects that a lot of times we do that stay with minds of others. Like me and you make videos, and to this day I'll still get comments on a video made 7 years ago. And
yeah, me too, actually.
yeah,
Me actually too.
you know,
And you go back and read it and think,
yes,
God damn, that was a different time, bro.
yeah, but also you also think, wow, this thing has touched some people. And that's one of the reasons why I started changing drastically that which I do today, is because when I was working in the kitchen and I was doing all right. I mean, it was a fun life to have, but essentially my life looked something like this. I was, cooking to make a living. The money I made, I would invest into the bike because I need the bike to have a certain sense of freedom, and then to reduce the stress that I get from the job which I have, which is cooking, which is staying in this closed environment with toxic people, with hot oil everywhere and a steamy air. To reduce that stress, I'm going to go and visit my girlfriend on the other side of the country, and when I'm there, I'm going to do nothing but ride my bike, lay in bed, watch Netflix, and do nothing. And it was it was a comfort zone. It was a very enjoyable way to live. The same way that I enjoyed playing War Thunder for 12 hours a day, eating junk food, getting drunk, getting high, doing nothing outside of creating video content. And I realized that I can do that indefinitely, in a way, right? I could stay in this limbo for 2, 3, 5 years, but what will happen is that at some point you stop. At some point, as you're walking through life, every once in a while you will stop, and you'll it's like you hear a voice somewhere behind you, and you look over your shoulder, and somewhere in the distance, you see the old version of you. And this person could be very close to you, could be very far away from you, could be very similar to you, could be completely different. That's the kid you were in high school. That's the kid you were in primary school. That's the, that one time you made a dumb mistake with a girl, or that one time you crashed your mum's car, something like that. These memories are still there, and ideally, you want those people to be as far away from you and as different as possible, so that you know that you're going in the right direction. And I had a moment, me and you, I believe we spoke towards the end of September somewhere. We had a conversation, and this is a great way for me to catch up, because I remember that conversation, and I remember how my room used to look like. I was sitting in a different area of my room. I didn't have the recording studio set up back the way it's supposed to be. I didn't have a job at the time. I didn't have my shit in order. I didn't have a mindset. I was lackluster and all over the place. And so being able to look back, in this case, just 4 or 5 months, and say, oh wow, I've made all this progress. And yet my mind still goes, not enough. Git Gud. Right? I keep going back to that old stuff that I've learned from this game and thinking, not in the perfectionist sense, not that it's never going to be enough, but just try to get more, try to squeeze more water out of that stone. Because what I've learned is that you get what you give. And I think both of us have given a lot to people. A lot of, how many hours of content have we put in YouTube videos? When I used to stream,
it's basically free entertainment that we provided. Like the only thing that you have to do is try to Google a certain topic, like a certain tank in your favorite video game. Let's call it War Thunder, and then you see the video. And and even without, for example, with Firefox, you can add something like an ad blocker, and you don't even watch the ad that gives not much money. Like, you can't make a living off this. And I just want to go back to this former self of mine. I remember exactly how it was when I started playing War Thunder, and I was just getting full addictive of it. Like, it was a true addiction. I couldn't live without a single day of playing hours of War Thunder. And I neglected university, which I deeply regret. And at the end of the day, I still managed it, but I managed my Master of Science despite War Thunder, not with War Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't tell this anybody that isn't in the topic, who plays the game itself and know how addictive it is. And there was a time when I freshly started, making YouTube. I was really bad with the editing up until I settled on the various different editing programs, how to make thumbnails, etc. It's a certain skill. These days, I just can make what I did in like an hour or so in a couple of minutes. Everything that the work that I put into the classic overall picture of how to make a thumbnail, there is already a file there that I just can use, change a little bit, voila, new thumbnail, right? I know how to speak fluently English. It's not perfect, but it's much, much better than what I started with. And it was horrible.
No, I have to commend your English, because I know, ironically, it's what I'm working on at the moment. Is I'm working on an online English course for pronunciation. I'm doing it because I understand, as a foreign speaker, I'm not British. I understand the hurdles that are required to get over. Because when you speak English, you're speaking. You go from first speaking German, right? You obviously have the German accent as you were born in Germany, and then you advance that into the German English, right? And that's why if you look at your videos, you go less and less. You're speaking, like the Germans, the typical, the vehikl, and so we used to have a lot of fun in this regard. But you've as you've progressed, you've taken a lot of that away. And what I have to commend you on so much for is your ability to pause and think and choose the correct word. You do this so much. As I've listened to you today, so many times you're able to just pause, not use a bunch of fillers like most people would, like, you've done none of that. You've just straight to the point, found the word you wanted to use, even if you had to like search through your head's dictionary for a little bit or translate it from German, but you found it and you used it, and it showcases. And I think that's so important, because this act of speech and this act of finding correct words in the right meaning and saying them with a certain emotion, that you can command people with so much more present. People listen to that more. They pay attention to that more. It's more effective for if you're dating, if you're going for job interviews, if you're having a presentation, if you're trying to teach somebody like the way you were teaching that kid. That kid was probably very lost, and he was like, "Oh shit, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing." But you're probably able to recognize that you too were at some point in the shoes of that kid, and you're able to recognize that fear. And that, I think, is what makes the best teachers, is their ability to recognize their old self in those people and then show them a way out, or a way in, I guess, if it's you're trying to introduce them to something.
Yeah.
My whole family,
fun...
they're all, yeah, I just want to say this because my whole family, they're all teachers, and at some point I also wanted to be a teacher, and I went to study for a teacher. I realized that I was going to hate it, because it's one thing to teach people, it's another to have the government tell you how to teach people. So,
Yeah.
and it's also what you teach them, because some things you're not supposed to teach, some things you're not supposed to say, right? Certain agendas or types of thinking are not, in this current world, motivated. You have to be very careful. Do you introduce religion? Do you introduce ethical and cultural beliefs? You have to be really like on this edge. What's moral and amoral, right? And whilst you can create debates over these things, like, is a war in a certain country okay or not? Is abortion okay or not? Is weed good or bad? Like, these things, you can have debates for it, but you can never definitively give anybody an answer. And humans, we're very driven to definitive answers. If I go on YouTube and I search for how to play Tiger 2, I want to have definitive answers. I don't want somebody to tell me, and that's why, you and me have succeeded in that realm, is because we were able to give people definitive ways to do something, even if it was under the lines of, say, you're playing it wrong, here, let me show you.
Yeah, teaching is actually a very difficult task, because while you kind of know what you know about the topic, you always can be surprised by some really easy answers that you just didn't think about.
Mm-hmm.
For example, and to go back here, one thing, I did not notice that you think about the way that you do, how I speak English or how I pronounce it and how I have evolved, because I'm always at this stage, when I'm just doing something, that everything that I know, I take for granted, and I kind of expect other people to know that as well. If you are in an environment when, for example, at university, and when you are already after your high school, which is
Mm-hmm.
A degree of knowledge that a lot of other people will never achieve in the first place. Not saying that they're dumb or thing, but they have just qualities in other aspects where you can't reach their level of skill. And you just are there kind of really in a difficult spot to get into the head of somebody else. What does he know? What can I build upon? And where I have to just make a little bit of a side course to give him the basic knowledge about that so I can build on that. And going back to the topic, the kid that I was teaching, he was saying, when we first met, he knows so much about chemistry and he's good at that and this. And I was leaning towards, yeah, that's making my job easier.
Mm-hmm.
But then I just went back to when I realized that he just stopped and looked for an answer, a really easy one, and he couldn't give me that answer despite him saying that he knows it. Then I dig deeper and I figured out that he actually once knew this according to his test results, but he has forgotten about it and not trained it excessively enough, just learning for the test basically and forgetting it afterwards, despite it being a fundamental portion of his future job, you know. And so, first of all, I then went in a brutal fashion and I broke the kid. I showed him that he has no idea what he's talking about. And then got him into that where I talked him, build him up again in the right way, saying, you got to realize this and that. I'm here for helping you, but there are some things that you absolutely need to know. And at the end of the day, he became better. And that was, again, one of the things that I think is also a really important knowledge, to work with people, to see where they are at. And there is another example. In the work where I'm right now, I always have lunch with a couple of people, the workers, the people from the storage area, etc. And I came into talking with one of the guys, and he said, "Yeah, I also love, space, etc., black holes, neutron stars, and all these things." And I just recently read a book about it, and I'm also quite a nerd on this topic. And I came across that he mixed up certain terminologies, and I tried to correct him on this. And I said to him, "You know what? Tomorrow I'll give you a book, from not from work, but from my private library." And I gave it to him. It's not a thick book. Like it's just, what was it, 150 pages?
Okay.
And there were also a lot of pictures. And I told him, just read it through. And the editors of this book are two well-known scientists here in Germany that are experts in their fields in astronomy, and they, make real-life examples of everyday observations that you can make, and then make, explanations of quantum theory and black holes and everything. Try to translate it from the different mathematical equations, with vectors and tensors and whatever, and, into basic German. And I gave him this book, not giving him any sort of time limits or whatever, and told him, take your time, read it, and this and this because it's well explained in this book. And a few days later, he gave it back to me with the words, "It's too complicated. I don't have time for this. The pictures look nice, but thank you." And I was like, and in my head, I was like, "Oh my God, this is exactly what you were asking for."
But
and
that's the excuse, right? That's because it wasn't easy.
It was, yeah, exactly. It's not like a TikTok short video or a shorts on YouTube. And there is some actual fundamental stuff inside of the book, right? And it gives you a bit more in depth. Like, it's not studying it. It's not like you going through all the examples and the various different thousands of examples in the sky. Just a few selected ones where you can easily see it, right? And I was kind of hating this guy for that. Not like really hating, but just the attitude. And
but I mean, it's also, it reminds me of.
It's not what he wants. It's not what he wants, right? He wants the exciting part.
He wants the too long didn't read, right?
Yeah, and I was like,
I mean, look, to give him the benefit of the doubt, it could be, I use this music as an example, it could be that the book wasn't written in the melody that would fit him. Because, there's certain songs I listen to that, you play them for most people, they'll be like Rammstein, right? Like, most people, you give them Rammstein, they'll be like, what the hell is this? Like, you really have to commit to it. But ironically, I'll never forget the first time I heard Rammstein. And if it wasn't for I think it was keine Lust, right? Which in German means like no motivation, like you have no desire to do something, right?
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the music video, which is the whole band of Rammstein being all like, they fakely make them all fat and like lazy, and they come down in a limo, and Till's got those like oxygen masks and stuff.
It's brilliant.
It's a brilliant video, but if I wasn't for the video, I think I wouldn't have clicked on it and watched the whole thing and then went like, screw it, I'll download the whole album. I don't know if have I told you the story how I got addicted to them?
No,
This is a
I
great one.
don't
So it
think
was
so.
in high school. I think it was second year of high school. So I was, I don't know how old I was, like 16. And we had this school trip for the next 2.5 days. And I was, at the time, I still do download my own music, but the way I would do it back then is like, you know, add like 2 albums per week or maybe per month. And because the trip was happening, I was like, okay, I'm going to spend 2 days on the of bus riding. I want to listen to some music. I want to listen to something new. And I just happened to find them just before I went to bed. And it was, so I download the Riser album, right? So Keine Lust and Dalai Lama, all these songs.
Yeah.
And I liked it because ironically the thumbnail, the picture of the album is the Fluchtrecorder, right? So the
Yeah.
black box.
Blackbox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought this is suitable because I like planes and whatnot. And we were driving on the bus and I didn't sleep much. So I thought, I'm just going to take a nap. So I turn on my playlist to, I don't know, some piano music or something, right? And I'm just stuck in this limbo. I can't, when you're like, you're almost asleep, but you can't quite fall asleep. So I thought, you
Yeah.
know what, fuck it. If I can't fall asleep, then I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm gonna make sure I don't sleep. So I'm like, oh, Rammstein, yeah, okay. I click play. I was sleeping like a baby 2 minutes later, and I didn't understand why. And that's how I started. And from that day on, I just love everything they do. And it's not because of the lyrics. And even though it's my favorite band, I still don't understand or know most of the lyrics. Is the melody that bought me so hard. The new album that they released, when I heard Lügen, Lies, for the first time, I
Yeah.
was like, even without listening, and now I speak way more German and I understand more German, I can tell what he's actually singing, but even without that, the melody, his voice, you can feel the emotions. It's why I find music so profoundly amazing, and why I think Germans do it so particularly well. So many German bands do it amazingly, because if you think about it, Germany, Austria, they were the pioneers of classical music. Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, they had, they had an orchestra in some cases, or a piano, but there was no singing back then. Like, the Blue Danube, how are you capable of telling such a strong story through just instruments? That is something that modern music doesn't cover, doesn't explain. No rap song, no matter how elaborate and amazing the lyrics are, will be able to go into the depth of telling a story through a freaking instrument, or having an orchestra the combination of violins and drums and trumpets and everything all together creates a story. And they without lyrics, they're able to say something. That is, to
Yeah.
me, that's astounding and so very important. And so I don't know where I was going with this, but I will finish by saying I do judge people who don't understand that. I find that I cannot click and have a good conversation with individuals who don't understand that on a fundamental level.
Mhm. For example, I was in Prague
Mm-hmm.
in the first week of this year, and we were visiting for the city for a couple of days. And there's the river, the Moldau, it's called in German, and there's also a classical music title, not what do you call it in English? It's actually difficult. So it's classical music called Moldau,
Mm-hmm.
and it has this amazing melody, and you just get really swung into it. And I highly recommend listening to it on YouTube. And we were watching like this city and this overall, the classical architecture. We were going on a little bit of a boat trip on the Moldau, listening to all the historical aspects when the various different bridges were built, how the city evolved
Mm-hmm.
on both sides of the river. And when now I knew this like years ago, that this song, or not song, but classical music piece exists and that it sounds really amazing. But
Composition.
now,
I think
yes,
composition is the right word.
composition. And now that I'm listening to it, all the pictures of me visiting this beautiful city comes into mind, and I hope I will never forget about this, even when I'm old. Because, as you said previously, one of the best things in life is to discover the world, and you have to do it when you're young, when you can,
Hmm.
without problems, travel long distances on train, plane, car, whatever. So, especially since I'm together with my girlfriend for quite a while now, the big problem was that in the first year or so, or after the first year, Corona hit. So, lockdown. And half the time we were together was basically uh, dominated by Corona and the travel restrictions.
Yeah.
But after this, we went on our first real holiday um, in Croatia, and we were there going by car. And this is also a fundamental experience when you just go through Bavaria and then Austria, and then you go through the huge, huge mountains, the Alps, and you just see how the culture slowly but steadily changes,
Yes.
kind of stays the same, but gets very different nuances. And then when we went through Croatia, it got slightly more Mediterranean, but not really that much. And then I remember it crystal clearly. We went around the corner and saw the Mediterranean Sea, and all of a sudden, all the houses just screamed, "You're in the Mediterranean area right now." It was
Yes.
coming around the corner,
Yes.
and I loved it. This crystal clear water that looked like you were in an advertisement. Yeah, you were literally in an advertisement, like crystal clear blue. The waves, we were high, we were going down the serpentines, slowly but steadily going along the coast to our final destination of the hotel. And it was beautiful. Memory that I will never forget.
Hmm.
Like the second holiday we had last year, actually. Um, Crazy to think about because it's already 23,
Yeah.
was also amazing, but not kind of the same first impression oomph moment,
It's
right?
never the same as the first time, yeah.
Yeah.
Although, as you mentioned the Mediterranean, this reminds me a lot. Slovenia, where I live, we have, in a very small country, you have a lot of diversity. And unlike Austria, Switzerland, Germany, which are renowned, for being really promising countries for people from the Balkan to go and move to, they unfortunately offer zero of that Mediterranean experience. And I was, as I was, the last girl I was dating, she lived in the coastal area, and so it was a relatively long drive there. But I explicitly remember there was this one long bridge that, as soon as I crossed it on the highway, I felt like I was entering a second home, like I was in a different country altogether. And ever since that day, I almost started thinking, I'd really want to live there, or at least have a residency where at a certain time of the year I can spend in that part of the country. And then that resulted in me looking at some of the prices of real estate in that area, and I thought, you know what, with a regular job, good luck getting there. So that too, I think, is another form of motivation or inspiration to do something beyond, or maybe play the game differently. But that said, I've never been fond of the regular, and I think if you follow my journey from the beginning of YouTube and the way that I played War Thunder, it showed that the approach was never regular. But that reminds me of the fact that no person who's ever made anything unique happen followed the regular, approach.
Yeah, there is a really interesting quote. Like, whenever I think about the great names in history, right, that are known for their scientific work, their artwork,
Hmm.
or whatever, and then you go and read up their history, and how they came to be. There is always something unique about it, right? And rarely is it's like following the trend and then just discovering something amazing or being able to do something. There are a lot of people that dare to try something new, and you read their success stories, right? What I think is a big problem is that for those people who failed, you rarely read something like this. On
That
the other hand, there is a really interesting quote from Michael
hmm
Schumacher, uh,
the goat.
the form the Formula One pilot, the
But you mean the driver?
yes.
Yeah, the greatest of
Um,
all time. I mean, next to Ayrton Senna and
oh,
my,
you
and my
mean goat in yeah.
yeah, the greatest of all time. That's what the goat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And he made a statement that basically in China there are probably a lot of people that could be better than him, but that didn't have the
yeah.
opportunity to, discover their skill or show people their skill. Like, you need to
Yeah,
be in a certain position already to get into a fast car to
you need
show
money
people.
also. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the entry level there is.
And I think that, in all honesty, humanity could have solved a lot of issues, like, fundamental issues in chemistry, in physics, in math, etc., and also in economic
Mhm.
things. Humanity could be further if everybody would have given the best of chances.
Yeah, but this is
Uh,
the debate between um, equality of opportunity and equality
yeah,
equality of outcome and equality of opportunity, right? So the idea that you could, because this is there's usually that meme you have it's a picture where you have a fence and you have three people at different heights and then you have a certain amount of boxes or crates you can have those people stand on, right? And
yeah,
so the equality of outcome, I think, is the way that everybody gets one box. But the correct way, suppose it would be that the tallest person doesn't get a box because he doesn't need to see over the fence. The smallest person gets two boxes so he can see over the fence, and the middle person gets just one box. That's, I mean, yeah, I guess in a utopian sense, it would be fair for everybody to get these shots, but I think in a lot of ways, it's the adversity that also makes those great men. I think that it's the determination that despite, being hindered by something, that they too can sort of push forward. You said, for all the great people that succeed, you don't hear about the people who fail. I don't think there are any people out there who fail and try again and fail and persist that don't make it somewhere. I think that even the guy who is the absolute biggest loser with a woman, who's constantly trying and trying and trying, at some point he will score. Like you're a fisherman, right?
yeah,
Now, the equal thing would be that all the fishermen at the side of a river have the same opportunity to catch a fish, right? So that when you cast your hook, you have the same chance as everybody else. And you can argue that, right? But the guy next to you's got a bigger fishing rod and he's got a bigger bait and he's got, and the truth is that at the end of the day, the guy who's going to walk away with the most fish probably won't be the guy with the biggest bait. Probably won't be the guy with the most luck. It'll be the guy who's most determined. Because most of them are going to go home, right? You're going to have a guy throw his hook and he's going to get a little bit of a bite and he'll pull on it and the fish will get away and he'll just be like, this is boring, whatever.
yeah.
When you
Well,
start a new activity, this is.
yeah,
I bet you most people that come into War Thunder, they play a couple of games, they get shot down. They're like, this is boring, whatever. They quit. So
yeah,
you need that determination. You need to be able to say, okay, so this is the name of the game. This is what it feels like to lose. Let me learn. Like playing chess. You make the wrong couple of moves. Oh, okay, so I lost my queen. Whatever. Keep fighting.
Yeah, and exactly that is a German, bit of a German joke. Um, Very often, fishermen go out there, they have their set rules, and they say you have to do this and you have to do that, and then, somebody just uses a different bait, just places the bait in a different area, different time of day, whatever, and is then all of a sudden against the odds successful. And this is a new person, a beginner, right? And in German it's called Anfänger. And so Fänger also means Anfänger means beginner or starter, but Fänger means also catcher. So,
Hmm.
in every beginner, there's also somebody that makes it different and therefore has success, breaking the norm a little bit, right?
Yes.
And I had some of those moments as well. As a little boy, catching things that weren't supposed to be in the river in the first place. So, this is also something that shapes you.
Yeah. But that's what both of us have in common with life and also with War Thunder. We were the pioneers essentially. I don't just consider us to be veterans because we were there so long and from such a early start, but that the way we approached the game was you were constantly trying to innovate. You're trying to find ways to get around a problem. Is there a more efficient way to do this? Is there a more quicker way to grind this? Is there this all sort of compounds and it creates more and more skill. And I love that I'm able to look back at it now through a bit of a different lens. It's not bitter. I don't feel like I'm not resentful for anything that happened. I don't hold ill will against any of the players that we had drama with or any YouTubers. I don't look at it as wasted time. I really have fond memories, and I'm just trying to extract as much as I possibly can of the skill that I've already attained here and just sort of copy paste it to other aspects of life.
Yeah. Well, there's one funny thing that now remembering it, um, when we basically talked at the very start, when we met each other, in War Thunder terms, you were mocking me because I played arcade, right? And I took
Yes,
different,
yes.
yeah, yeah, and
But
and I
that was a
took
different
different,
approach, right? Isn't that like I'm being hypocritical back then, right? But what I'm saying now is that was your approach to it, and in a lot of ways, it completely makes sense.
yeah,
Like you
and
wanted to just because you wanted to just play tanks, right? That was, I think, your biggest gripe was you were one of the players that didn't enjoy close air support, not because you didn't want to necessarily play it or play against it. It was just you wanted to play a tank and enjoy it, right?
yeah, I was like, I took something different out of War Thunder. Like you were a person that were really into playing the game, embracing its rules, getting the most out of. Where you said, "Yeah, I'm dropping an artillery strike not to kill, but mostly to get hits, to increase my spawn points,
Mm-hmm.
to get faster into a plane." Or, for example, when we were playing together, there's still a video out there when you were in the mouse and I was in the E100. And it was at the end of the battle, we both survived, and you just bailed out getting into a plane. I would have never done this. It was not just because
Yes.
of the KD or anything, but just to waste the tank. For me, it meant a bit more than just one card in the deck. Like it had a bit more character to me, and especially how I won the 100. Oh, that was a different story. But like I was always playing the vehicle rather than playing the tank. This is why I also had a bit of a different approach with my videos because I was focusing more on the vehicle at hand, right? I was not talking too much about lineups. I mean, I was always playing them, but I was never using them. And going back to the arcade thing, when you said you were hypocritical, I don't know if you remember this, but we were talking so often, and after a couple of months, I just happened to go into a game of War Thunder Arcade Ground Forces arcade, and you were spawning right next to me. I did not know that you were trying it. I thought it was like somebody impersonating you or something, but no, it was actually you, and you were the first one to die, and I laughed my ass off. I laughed my ass off.
Oh.
But but honestly, I then wrote you and you were like rage. Oh, this is so much bullshit. How can you play this? And I was like, haha. A week later, I tipped my toe into realistic, and I remember the first battle in Panzer IV. I was going on this one desert map, and I was going on the low ground. So all the fighting happened on the high ground where there were the two, where there was the one village and the
Main, I
one where
think
there's
that
the
is.
bridge. I'm not quite sure if it's that map, but basically on the low ground, it was just a very small, it was just a couple of buildings, and it was all the dunes and the desert,
Yeah, yeah,
and it
that's
was
LL
all there.
Main, 100%. It's gotta be.
Yeah, and it was all by myself, and I was thinking, how the fuck is that something that people are excited about? Yes, it was just one example of a battle, and and I have just chosen the wrong side
Yeah, but
of
I
that
mean,
map.
it is enough if you think about it, right? Like that was what I was fighting for was the idea that all maps should have the same layout, the same feeling, so that this doesn't happen, right? Because then you don't have that thing where the entire team goes to Charlie and one person goes to Bravo, and then there's like nobody at Alpha. Because you're that player, you're sitting there, you capture the point, you wait for a couple of seconds, like, oh, maybe some other tank's gonna come, and then you slowly start making your way to the enemy spawn point and realize there's no one freaking there. And then you got to drive across half the map. You finally get up to that hill, right? Because you got the wrong tank, let's say, and then you captured that point as well. At which point, some other dude's now spawned in the desert, right? And he's taken that capture point back. And then you go driving, and it's just boring. It's back and forth.
Yeah,
It's no more
and this,
it's no more fun than I don't know, going back to base to rearm and repair in
yeah,
a big air
and
match.
and and that brings then the old memes like you're driving there in a mouse for 5 minutes, finally getting there where a light tank would have been like 4 minutes earlier, and then across the map an object 120 just takes a pot shot at you and you violently explode, and it's just a big waste of time, you
I mean,
know,
or
and
better, you hear the sound of dropping bombs, and you're like, this again.
or all of a sudden you explode and kill message KF-15. Oh, you know, all those things. So War Thunder is both, I think, a source of utterly endless frustration. But then when the stars align, you just feel like a drug addict after a new shot. You just big relief, you're
Yeah,
happy, and then the feeling lasts like exactly 10 seconds before you press the battle button again, and you just go through 100 battles of misery in the hope for just to get the same feeling again,
but
like the feeling I had after the 15 to 1 match in the Tiger
mhm,
2-105, or the one Kika match that I told you. Those are the stories that you talk about. Those memories will stay there.
yeah.
Not the 50,000 other battles that you played. It's exactly those moments. And also when you show this on YouTube, then you get the criticism, yeah, you're cherry picking. Yeah, but on the other hand, this was so amazing. I wanted to show you.
No, I never
And
understood
then
the whole cherry picking because it's like that's like saying Mozart should have released all his shitty songs as well, and Pablo Picasso should have shown all his bad pictures. It's like it doesn't make sense. You want to present the best there is. Now that said, there were content creators that I had issues with because what they would do is they'd play two matches in a vehicle, and then showcases as if they know everything they're talking about. That's where I drew the line, right? Because you check their stats and it's like, wait a minute, Buster, you haven't done your homework, right? Because I was one of those people. Admittedly, I was playing a lot, but I would play sometimes 20, 25 games just to get one match that I thought was not that it was the best match, but it was the best match to showcase, like you said, the vehicle. Because if it's about a certain tank, then you want to show a game that really showcases the strengths of that tank.
yeah.
You want the right
Um,
map, you want the right team, the circumstances are a little bit
yeah.
mixed up.
But that is also like the amount of different scenarios that you find yourself in War Thunder are, I think, unprecedented. And you also can take vehicles of much lower battle rating, for the memes, for the um, what's the title? Not God of War, but when you kill something that's 5 battle ratings higher than you or 5 ranks.
I've no idea.
You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about,
I know
right?
what you mean, but
Um,
probably David and Goliath, something like that.
yeah, something like this along the ways. God mode. It's God mode.
Ah, God mode.
And yeah, and this is where the memes come from. And I made also a video like, you can spawn later on. And in theory, you can one-shot the latest and greatest Abrams from the side with a Panzer IV F2 to get the shot in the first place. That's the difficult part, right? But then you get rewarded with 20 to 30,000 extra silver lines, right? And this is also something that you can make a video about. And I just looked up my views recently. Some videos create views even years after you publish them.
Mm-hmm.
My big Silverline grinding guide has breached 100,000 views, which is great for me. I struggle to make 2K these days, which is awful, to be honest. When you drop off like how the thing treats you um, from YouTube, the algorithm, how you try your best, and you don't get success. On the other hand, when you start off and the algorithm is with you because of luck, whatever, then you're just fully motivated, and War Thunder is all that matters. And I've been there in the growth phase where I said to myself to go right back to the restart of the discussion. I could do this all day long, and I was literally there deciding if I should throw my university and just go full content creator. And I've decided against this, but at the time it was a tough decision because it was so easy to put out the content
Mm-hmm.
to see the channel grow. And I was in the situation where I extrapolated it to say, in 2 3 years I have that many thousand subscribers and that many thousand views, and I could earn money. But it was also the time when Gaijin introduced some shenanigans, and I realized, hold on a moment, I rely on YouTube,
Yes.
I rely on Gaijin to not shut down the servers. Any sort of single incident could absolutely kill my YouTube channel, and then I'm left with nothing. And
Yes.
this partially happened when I killed that one guy that then went on Reddit and made a big drama out of it, right? Um, that kind of cost me dearly, but I didn't care because my livelihood doesn't rely on this, right? And so it was the very best decision in my life to not become a full-time content creator. I was close to it,
Mm.
but I never made that decision.
Well, I'm personally I'm happy I did because I gave it a try for a year, and I did it because I wanted to figure out if it was something I'd see myself doing. Is it a fulfilling type of life? Because to a person who's going to university or working some boring job they don't enjoy, they might think, oh, this is great. This guy just plays video games all day. But I realized quite quickly that I didn't have a social life. I didn't have. I had friends, but it wasn't the same feeling. I wasn't learning or doing sports. I was sort of just you're just wasting time in a weird way.
Yeah.
Because look, if you like scrolling through TikTok for hours on day, and somebody offered you to give you money for that, then you'd be inclined to give it a try. But no, I think differentiating your getting more income streams is a very, very smart way to go these days. To have a lot of different ways that you get money, and to just base it off of YouTube, to just base it off of one game, I don't know. And I've always been sketched out because when I started doing YouTube, one of the biggest names in the community for the longest time. I think the biggest YouTuber for War Thunder is Fly Daily. We can agree there, right?
Yeah.
Before Fly, you had Entak. Entak was the biggest guy to make content. He was at some point, I think he was making content that was either for Gaijin or the Gaijin was promoting, but he was like at the forefront. He was then joined by Fly and Baron from Games, and the harsh reality today is that I don't think Baron exists in the realm of content creation. Entak for sure has disappeared. these guys, they've made 1 million YouTube subs, and they're nowhere to be seen. And that's something that I was afraid of. And ironically, now I'm sitting on less than 50,000 subs. I've actually lost 360 subs in the last month. I'm getting barely 1,000 views per video, but I'm committed to continue telling the story the way it is, and whether people join in on it, that's their prerogative. But YouTube is a harsh environment, because what you really have to do to succeed is you have to catch the algorithm, like you said. You have to ride it out fully and hope that in that time you've been able to expand into some other business or different types of YouTube channels, or made it into a conglomerate to the point where it's just continuously making money, or you just have to cash out of it completely. Hope you make so much money from it that it can last you the next couple of years, or maybe till the end of your life, and then you're good. I think if you live in some third world country where the average income that you'd get in American dollars makes sense, and you have access to a computer, you have access to editing software, give it a try, because that could be your break out of it,
Yeah.
The reason why I personally refuse to let go of all of this completely is because of the skill sets I've acquired, and because I know that I have more to give, and most importantly, I'm sitting around surrounded by equipment, surrounded by a studio, surrounded by a productivity space that I built 100% by myself. Nobody else helped me, nobody else financed it, and I think it's a waste not to utilize that. Because most people, what they have is they have ideas, they have their own little plans they want to do, they have excuses, most importantly, and I think what it takes for a person to succeed is to look beyond the bullshit, to look beyond the denial, and just persist. The same way that these people that you read books of now, the people that have succeeded in highest levels of sport, they've come there not just because they were skilled, not just because they were talented, not just because they had support or whatever. The playing field is never going to be equal, right? You're going to play a video game, sure. The guy next to you spent more money than you. The guy next to you spent more time than you. The guy next to you, maybe they have better eyesight. They've got a bigger monitor. They've got a better computer. They see more FPSs. You can always find another excuse, and this is where I think we start camouflaging reasons for excuses, where we say, well, the reason I lost. No, it's just another excuse, right? You're just trying to find. It's like, I don't know if you remember, but the real day that I quit, I think, was January 2017, when I was in that duel with the guy called the Ladno. It was a BF-09F. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I quit because of the reason that ping was bad. I could see that his plane wasn't going to hit me, and yet his plane hit me. But that's really just an excuse, right? I shouldn't have been in a position of that duel where the guy could get shots on me in the first place. So as much as I can look for excuses or reasons or whatever, the reality is I sucked and I lost, and it hurts the ego, and it hurts but I'm glad it happened, because it got me moving. It got me out of the slum and into the world, and one thing leads to another,
Well, I get the feeling, and I think that this is a very, very interesting and important point for people that are probably now looking into content creation. There are people that, or I think the most people that get into War Thunder and really overcome the initial fall off the cliff, like when you realize what you have to do, how thing it is, how steep and difficult it can be, especially with planes. There is one thing. Either you get really annoyed and leave War Thunder, or you get hooked. And when you're hooked, you're having fun. You see progress. You see yourself getting better. You learn the maps, you learn the vehicles, you learn the game mechanics, and you get really into the rhythm of, ruling the matches. You're together with people. You're having fun communicating, really try-harding and sweating, and you get good. And in that stage, you feel like you can live the game. And then when you also make YouTube videos and they get going, with subscribers and views, you really are convinced that this is your future. You're good at it. It's easy, chi ease. And then the change come when all of a sudden you realize you're playing the game to create content, and you have to create content. You have to play that new tank, plane, whatever. You have to um, play the game and that new event, that whatever event it is, and you have to do it. And you feel obligated to do this.
It's a
And all
job.
of a sudden, and all of a sudden, you can't go out there Saturday night, with your friends,
Hmm.
having a date, whatever, having private life. You're there, and all of a sudden you realize that you're putting an awful amount of money into the game, an awful amount of equipment, better microphones, better PC graphic cards, various different programs, whatever, and especially time. And I think that this is where all of a sudden the sweet grapes can turn into sour, rotten grapes, right?
Yes.
When it just switches from having fun to being an awful job, especially when then the game introduces new stuff that you didn't ask for,
Mm.
that is overpowered. All your previous stuff gets made irrelevant, and you're against this. And you think that you're in a position where you just feel like you should have an opinion that is heard of, and you get completely ignored, not by the community, but by the game developer, right? And I think that this is a really critical part, that this is something that you must be aware can happen. Because if you then put all your eggs in one basket to, throw your job, throw your university, whatever, for that, then you have to ask yourself, is there a way back to go back to the old route and know how things are going? And I think that a lot of people, especially with War Thunder, because it's a game of endless possibilities and endless what could be things.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, it's just a machine to create money for Gaijin. And you were talking about that there are tons and tons of vehicles. I have over 2,200 like on my account already, and there are multiple hundreds more to go, right? So it's a never-ending grind, and you have to ask yourself, are you grinding or are you enjoying the game? Because there are three types of people that I, at this very moment, envy. Number one, those who are in the endless hamster wheel grinding circle and enjoy it,
Hmm. So,
power to them. Then there are the ones who just turned around and left the game. Power to you. You achieved something that I don't think I can achieve anytime soon. And then there are the people that have found their favorite vehicle and playing just that, not caring about the grind, Civilized, the latest and greatest
hmm,
premium, whatever. They're
they just come into
somewhere
the
in.
game every once a week and they have a little bit of fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I envy all those three at the moment, because I'm still, because you were saying that I'm one of the few guys that is still playing boats and ships. Yeah, but this is also the last faction of War Thunder where there are significant additions to be expected. We don't have Bismarck, Iowa, King George V, and Yamato in the game yet. They're still to come.
I
But we
know,
all.
but I'm thinking from the perspective of a content creator, and the value in it that unless what they're going to do with boats is that it somehow rejuvenates and brings thousands of players and thousands of viewers, and that you being there allows you to be the next greatest content creator. I don't see that being a likely possibility. In fact, War Thunder for me has always been, I try to look at it from the education standpoint. I was always trying to teach people how to be better. But unfortunately, YouTube as a platform is predominantly entertainment based. People still want entertainment, and I don't know how to give. You said you don't see yourself being able to quit anytime soon, but that gives me the feeling that somewhere deep down, on a fundamental subconscious level, you're aware that your life would be better off without the game as it is today. That even though a certain part of you, enjoys it, and you do derive a certain feeling of pride, and that you can create content and you can create value. Actually, value is this really important word that I want to emphasize on, because when we're making content, you really have to create value for people. And I realized that over a certain level, I could no longer provide value. I couldn't. I wasn't enjoying the game. I wasn't enjoying the content creation. I wasn't enjoying the developer. I was enjoying the community. It was like, what kind of value can you give people besides just rambling or giving them knowledge and stuff? You want to give them I don't know. I've always felt most powerful when I could transform people. I could see them change. Whether it's little wins sometimes.
Yeah. Well, back to that one topic. Maybe I'll shock you with this number, but as of today, I am on day 2,805 of daily logins.
Jesus freaking Christ.
It's an achievement of its own. I actually was there.
I think you might be the only guy with that.
I know that there might be a few people that are a couple of days further, because I know that I was on a streak of 150 days when I just didn't log into War Thunder for a week or so, and the progress got completely wiped, and then started again in the time where I played World of Tanks, because War Thunder Tank Beta was just so utterly bad, and I had all the planes, and I just, didn't feel like playing. I think that this was the chance where I could have gone, away from War Thunder, but I came back and came back and came back for more of the bias, and I think that I'm not joking when I say that I know that I'm addicted, because not just from my point of if I leave now, I miss the chance of becoming the next big YouTuber when Gaijin gets Naval Forces fixed. I know that they don't give a fuck about it because it creates enough money as it is, right? And this brings me back to one point. How many players do you think are currently online in War Thunder?
Well, if you're asking me what the number is, I would assume it's between 90 and 120,000, but how many players are actually on there?
Right now, 165,000.
See, that number is good, but the problem with the number War Thunder has is that it doesn't...
I don't know what that number means. I tell you. And this brings me back to a point that I was sadly not able to finish earlier, like an hour ago or something. Like, we're recording for over 1.5 hours now.
We're 3 minutes away from 2.5 hours, actually. So I'm gonna have to wrap the whole thing up. Yeah, it's the problem with us. We're both ramblers. Go on.
It's terrible. I thoroughly enjoyed it though.
Absolutely.
If you want more and you're still here, let us know in the comment section down below. No, one thing that I absolutely failed to finish earlier. That one of the reasons why Gaijin is still earning a lot, and I mean a lot, of money with Naval Forces is that the grind is awful. Like, if you're not in the flavor of the month and you don't have the very best crews, it's disgustingly bad.
Okay, but that's not just naval, right? I mean, if you...
Yeah, but here's the thing. Because Naval Forces had so little players at one point, Gaijin gave some of the premium ships, especially the USS Moffat and USS Helena, and a lot of other premium destroyers and cruisers, a modifier of 8.0. You know what that means?
No idea. To be completely honest.
With a premium account, you get a basic civil line modifier of 1,200% every game.
Okay, that's a lot.
I kid you not, and I don't know if I have shown you the screenshots, but I have played multiple battles with the 300% booster, where I did a bit of things, I made a video about it, where I got 1 million silver lines per game. And I can do this every single day. But after the fifth, sixth battle where you get this, it gets a bit boring. But I could do this on a daily basis, and I have talked, and I have shown people. That's why a reason why the one video is getting so many views. But here's the thing, and finally I'm coming to the point. I know it's way too late by this point, but people have actually created bot programs running War Thunder. And they're just there in their USS Moffat, in their USS Helena, and letting the autogunners do the job, right? And they just let War Thunder run every day, and everything that the program is doing is pressing the battle button, spawning in, and switching to the AA. And so the autogunners of your main guns shoot automatically if you go to the secondaries or to the AA, right? And because of this massive modifier, even by only taking hits and only by maybe damaging another ship with a couple of hits, you create enough that at the end of the day, quite literally, when you're coming home and the bot program has run 24/7, you're still making 500,000 silver lines.
Right, let me stop you there, because the thing is, you're coming home after a long day of
Yeah.
doing God knows what to a computer that's been running all day,
Yeah.
so that you can have silver lines, a virtual currency in a video game, so that you can buy virtual shit that you don't need to play the game at night. Do you know how ridiculous that is? It's the next level of ridiculous. Like, I want to wrap this by saying the following: is that I spent over 10,000 hours playing War Thunder, and I feel like a lot of that time was wasted. And that's knowing that I've made a YouTube channel, a Twitch channel, met thousands of people, influenced thousands of people, learned superb English, made all these connections, all this knowledge and experience in editing softwares, and despite all that, which separates me massively from the average person, I feel like it's time wasted. And so I know for a fact that the people who have done nothing of that sort are definitely wasting time. And I say this not just to you, but to everybody as a friend, that whilst there is temporary fun to be had in the game, I have to say that the outside world, once you are able to break completely clean of this game, and the person I want to shout out here is Quetzal, my mod, because he was the first person that I know that was successfully able to just quit the game. Now, he is a bit extreme. He went cold turkey. He just never touched it again. He wasn't interested. But I envied his freedom. And if any of you are still listening to this and you're in a position where you envy the people who have quit, it doesn't have to be War Thunder. It could be any game, could be any activity, could be any addiction. If you know someone who's managed to stop doing that, whether it's stop using Instagram or stop drinking or stop smoking, if you know and that person makes you feel envy, then you know you've got a problem, and you too should do something about it. And trust me, life gets better.
Oh, yes, it does.
So is there anything else you want to say to wrap the stream up? Obviously, your links will be in the description once this is released. Any questions people might have, maybe we'll answer it. Maybe we'll have another. Well, we're definitely going to have another conversation, because it's always fun talking to you. Even though I know that what I have to do with you is I have to sort of try to pull you away from the War Thunder analytical talk, so that we get into the nitty gritty of life, and then really our conversation picks up pace.
Yeah, it's like the autobahn of arguments because you know so much and then you just ramble on and time flies by and you know that you barely have said anything but you talked a lot. So it's obviously a little bit dangerous. But I know that I have this weakness, but I made a YouTube channel out of it. So there are some people that apparently enjoy it, and I know that a lot of my subscribers by name. And I know that they are still with me after all the fun and also difficult times. And my thank goes out for them. And I'm not producing that much videos. And to be honest, I don't know how I did it in the past to put out a YouTube video every day. Like, I don't know how I did it. And these days, I'm very picky with it. And it's in a state where I know that I could do more, but the question is, why should I? And I think it's at some point I have to go back to basics and just jump into a Panzer IV F2 and just go for it, racking up some kills, just ramble a little bit about it. And it's a decent video that some people might enjoy while they make, their snack, their food, just want some entertainment. And I should go back to this and not just over engineer a video with all the graphs and Excel spreadsheet parts. That is cool as well, and you understand the game from a different perspective when you look at this. And at the end of the day, it's just a game, bro. Why you have to be mad?
Correct. Yeah.
But
Well,
but on the other hand, damn, if I only have this tank. To this day, I don't have the IS-7.
actually, you know what?
And
Quick question: if you could just choose one tank you could play for the rest of the game, what would it be? Don't.
ooh, that's a difficult
Nah,
one.
you guys shoot out the barrel. Any tank.
Ah,
It's got to be the
Tiger 2105. It
good
has to
choice.
be.
Very good
It has
choice.
to be my love. It's just, it's sexy. It has style, and as Fly once said it, the gun sound, that the feeling of something exploding on the receiving end of the shell, it's just like a clicker for a dog.
Correct.
It just is.
The sound
Like
of
the
that gun is enough to
ah
make you want to turn on the sounds if you're like me. Yeah.
yeah, I mean Panther 2, absolute style, fits perfectly into the lineup. I love the mouse and the 100, also IS-4, IS-3, and a lot of other, M103. What a tank, what a gun, right? But that Tiger 2 with the 105, there's just something about it
Yeah,
that
there's
I
no match
can't
to it,
put
I
my
know.
finger on it and say that's the thing if another tank has it, because it's not just the gun sound, it's not just the look of the vehicle, or the skin, the history I have with this tank, the one battle I have it. It's just a tank, right? Amongst the hundreds and potentially thousands of tanks that there are in the game, most of them are copy and paste anyway. This tank stands out. And I think it's one of the biggest crimes from Gaijin to deny this experience to new players.
I have to absolutely agree with you. And on that bombshell, we're now closer to 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I have to cut us off because it's been a wonderful conversation. I hope everybody's enjoyed it, and I hope to hear from you again very, very soon, man. But thank you,
Okay.
and
My pleasure. And one final word. I'll read the comments under this video. If you have any questions, I'll answer it.
good. Thank you, man, and we'll talk soon.
See ya.